Good morning. May I call the meeting to order, please? First order of business is public speaking. Doug, do we have public speakers?
Yes, sir. We have a long list of speakers, so I'll ask everyone to please maintain a 2-minute speaking period on agenda items only. Our first speaker, Larry Silverman, followed by William Henderson and Patrick Shelley. Mr. Silverman.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I see some familiar faces here. Ladies and gentlemen, at one time I was on this board as a watchdog for commuters, and I was also chairman of the Long Island Railroad Commuter Council. And there came a time in 1995 when the state and the city started cutting its contributions to the capital plan. And a number of us spoke out about it, good government groups on both sides of the aisle, conservatives, liberals, and said this is unsustainable. It's a word we've heard recently in the world, unsustainable borrowing. But our voices weren't heard. I was a board member at the time. I stood up here and said something about it. And the reason I'm here today, I'll tell you in the interest of full disclosure, I'm a candidate for state senate on Long Island in the 5th District. And I've never gotten over what I saw take place in this room at those times. I've never gotten over that so much damage could be done to an agency in such short a time by so few people who basically were motivated by their own political interests. And we wrote articles and nothing could have been done about it. It was a runaway train, in the words of one of the articles I wrote. And the reason I'm here today is, even though you are not a sympathetic group and you're always on the front page and you're always getting killed in the media, the fact is that you're victims as well. You're victims of a state legislature that doesn't do what it's supposed to do, neglects what it should do. It's now front page news nationally. And I think it's very important that that get out. And I'm hoping to be part of that voice. And I'm hoping to be part of that voice in Albany. Now, you could say I'm here for my own political interest, and that's really true. I have to get my message out. That's fine. But the facts are the facts. And the borrowing took place, and it was a crime against working people. It really was. Because, for those of you who don't know, it was $17 billion. It's about $150 million a month, is it, this agency has to pay now on debt service? It has to come up with? And if you take that out of the equation, do you have a financial crisis? No. There were people before that who understood that you needed dedicated revenue to pay for infrastructure, for capital improvements. But where is that $150 million coming from today? It's coming out of operating expenses. I know you all know that, but they don't, and the people don't. So, we go through these hearings from time to time. We have these conversations. You propose necessary increases because you've got to balance your budget. And the people look at this agency and they think you're all at fault. Well, you may be able to save some money here and there. We know that. There's plenty of places to save money. But you can't make up $150 million a month no matter what you try to do unless you have Albany's help. So I'm here to help you get the word out. And my passion makes me run for state senate. And I really hope to be your champion in Albany. But the last thing I'm going to tell you is you folks have to be champions of the riders too. I know you're appointed by a mayor and a governor, but you've got to have a collective voice that says that Albany has to solve the problem it created. And I'm tired of hearing elected officials in this state take money out of your budget and then complain about the fare increases.
Please conclude your comments, Mr. Silverman.
I shall, Mr. Sussman. I've always respected the clock. I had a number of prepared comments. And the only other thing I'll say is on the agenda you have something about indemnification of board members. My understanding of the law when it was passed recently was that there was going to be some accountability in terms of board members and their fiscal responsibility or their fiduciary duty to this organization, and I'm not sure that portion of your revised bylaws that deals with indemnification is in the letter or spirit of that law.
I thank you, Mr. Silverman. Our next speaker, William Henderson, PCAC, followed by Patrick Shelley and the Honorable James Vaca, member of the New York City Council.
Good morning, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you this morning. First, I want to take a moment to commend the board and the senior staff of the MTA for the great effort you made over the past 8 months to put the MTA's fiscal house in order. Something we don't often say, and we probably don't say enough, whether we agree or disagree with what you do. We greatly appreciate the work that you do, and that goes for both the members and the staff. The way we fund transit in this region is based on a unique understanding among those representing a wide range of interests that transit provides substantial benefits to parties other than the people who ride it. The benefits to riders are clear, and the riders pay for these benefits through fares that make up the highest percentage of the cost of operation of any major transit system in the nation. What sets us apart, however, is that we also acknowledge the value that a functioning transit system creates for drivers, for business and industry, and for the owners of real property. It's a truism, but it's one worth repeating, that the region simply could not function without a functioning transit system. Last spring, we believed that we had an arrangement that was based on an equitable division of responsibility between those benefited by transit. More recently, however, riders are increasingly feeling that while others fail to act, or even withdraw funding, they are being held to this deal and being forced to shoulder an ever greater burden through service cuts and fare increases. Further, some of the proposals that have been advanced, such as restrictions on time-based Metro cards and commuter rail tickets, threaten to change riders' view of transit as a first option for moving around the region. We'll speak further about the fare proposals when the time comes, but we do want to say that you need to be very careful about what you do and the unintended consequences of what you do here. The PCAC and its councils have consistently supported fare policy that includes regular moderate increases to maintain the careful balance between the various MTA funding sources. While we recognize that efforts have been made to reduce the impact of the fare increases that you'll present today on those who can least afford them, we cannot tolerate a situation where riders carry an ever larger share of the burden of supporting the system, and we can't support any further service cuts. We recognize that a fare increase may be a necessary evil in the short term, but in the longer run, the MTA financial plan must seek to restore balance between what is provided and what is received by the beneficiaries of the transit system. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Patrick Shelley, followed by Myron Kuchera, and then Denise Richardson.
Good morning. For the record, it's Patrick
And
Scully.
I'm sorry, we have James Vaca, whose name I believe you are here, Councilman? I'm sorry. Would you mind deferring to the Councilman first?
You want me to step back?
If you don't mind.
Okay, no problem.
Councilman James Vaca.
Yes, hello, members of the board. I would say first that it's a pleasure to be here, but it's a pleasure to see you. But I was last here when we had service cuts proposed, and I'm back now because we're proposing fare increases. So I would like to meet you under better circumstances. I do have to tell you, though, that while the MTA is in a financial ditch, that ditch is really going to be involving people who are strap hangers, because the strap hangers, again, one way or another, have to pay. Strap hangers who are not responsible for any of this, bottom line, will pay and have paid. You know, in the past, the MTA was forced to go to the fare box because the MTA wanted to preserve service. But here, what we face is that service has already been significantly reduced, and on top of that, we face a fare increase. There's a disconnect. Strap hangers feel, and rightfully so, that they are facing the prospect of already diminished service, and on top of that, a fare increase. Now, how did this happen? I did hear Albany mentioned before, and I have to say that that's not of the MTA's making. People should know that there was a lockbox, in 2009. Partially, what Albany did, they raised taxes, and when they raised taxes, the MTA anticipated revenue, and Albany overestimated how much revenue the MTA was going to get, so therefore, that was revenue you never saw. Then they raised taxes and put it into a lockbox. The lockbox was not supposed to be touched. That $143 million was supposed to go for mass transit, and it was taken and it was put in the general fund. It was confiscated. That's the bottom line. It sounds familiar to many of us who have been around a long time. Reminds me of the lottery money that everybody still thinks went to education, but we all know that that went to the general fund too. So the reality is that it's a double whammy on taxpayers. We were sold a false bill of goods. And I want to work hard with you, I hope, to make sure that Albany, because they're still in session, and they probably will be in session until snow comes, they should live up to their responsibility and put this on the agenda to at least keep their word to the taxpayer. Because in the future, as we talk about dedicated taxes for this and dedicated taxes for that, the public is cynical because of this money being confiscated. I've mentioned other things that the MTA may want to consider. I know that you have implemented some efficiencies, but it is galling to people to look at the MTA website and see jobs advertised for administrative purposes when you've already cut and laid off people in administration and you're advertising other titles. It would seem to me that the first thing you should do and consider is a job freeze for those titles that you deem not essential. That's good faith with the public. It's inconsistent to, on one hand, be laying off, and then on the other hand, for non-essential titles, you should be hiring. I come to you because strap hangers in the city have had it. Put yourself in their position. You're waiting. You're forced to transfer an additional time or two to get to your destination. The transfers are more. The waiting is more. The fares are more. The service is less. So therefore, we look to you. We know you're going to have public hearings. We want you to listen at those public hearings to reasonable suggestions. There's got to be reasonable suggestions. There's got to be a way to mitigate some of these increases. There's got to be a way for Albany to be forced to live up to its responsibility to all of us. And I want to be helpful in that effort. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Patrick Shelley.
Yes, thank you. For the record, it's Patrick Scully. I'm here to talk on the subject of procurement of natural gas buses. I'm from Orion Bus Industries, located in Oriskany, New York. And the issue before you today, before the board, I'd like to state as a policy decision before the board. It came before the Bus Operations Committee earlier this week. But quite frankly, it's a board decision on how to spend state tax dollars and, quite frankly, maintaining jobs in the state. We hear all the issues in front of you. We're actually here with solutions, how to spend the right money in the right place. We build Orion transit buses in Oriskany, New York, and we employ over 600 hourly and salaried staff. We've been working with the MTA for the last 15 years with almost 3,000 buses produced for the MTA in the state. You've got some of the best staff in the country, some of the best staff in the world, quite frankly, on the operations side and on the procurement side. Orion and its workers pay over $1 million annually in state taxes to help fund state programs, including operations of the MTA. As I said, the Bus Operations Committee has recommended the award of 135 natural gas buses with options for an additional 340 to an out-of-state producer. This issue is before the board today. We respect the staff and Bus Operations Committee recommendation, but there are some important facts that need to be brought to the board's attention. First, reliability data was discussed in the Operations Committee. It's true that the buses referenced from 2003 and 2004 compared to our competition are below the level of our competition. However, the most recently delivered buses, natural gas buses, have an MDBF value of 9,400 miles, which is over 2.5 times that of the data that was referenced. This improved value is a testament to the investments we've made as a company in both our product and the quality that is built into our product by our New York State workforce. Secondly, price was cited as a factor in our bid, which after evaluation was $4,500 higher than our competition. However, this is after a $15,000 evaluation credit was applied to our competitor's price, and only a $6,000 credit was applied to Orion's bid. Further, we provided incentives of $10,000 lower cost,
summarize your comments,
and this should be evaluated as well. Again, this issue is jobs. We face a reduction in our job force next year and line rate, which could be up to 30%. And these are important decisions that we'd like the board to consider from a policy perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, Myron Kuchera, Denise Richardson, then John Samuelson.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Myron Kuchera. I'm the president of the United Auto Workers Local 2243 in Oriskany. Represent 400 men and women who build the Orion bus. And we also, I'm here to represent my non-represented colleagues in Orion. We're here to state that your evaluation is flawed and your MDBF data is much better than referenced at the Monday, July 26, 2010 bus committee meeting. As a matter of fact, your own monthly operation reports reflects that Orion buses have improved by 2.5 times over the previous models. Our ultimate price is lower, not higher, and we are gravely concerned that a wrong decision will send our hard-earned tax dollars to support jobs in Minnesota, not New York. We want to make sure that the MTA and all of our fellow New Yorkers are aware that the United Auto Workers recently lobbied in Albany for funding for the MTA. I've had approximately 100 union members from Buffalo to Long Island to Messina to Binghamton to Central New York. We lobbied on your behalf to try to get you funding. We actually had a meeting right in the governor's office. Our biggest concern is jobs, not only jobs in Central New York, but throughout New York State, including right here in downtown New York City. Orion has been here for almost 30 years versus our competition they come and go. And we've been building you a quality product for many, many years, and we established a great working relationship with all of you folks. Putting our hard-earned tax dollars to good use. Buying Orion, New York State-made Orion buses will put our hard-earned tax dollars to good use. We'll all get the best and the most for our money, and our money is going to stay in New York State.
Please summarize your comments.
All right. It only makes sense to support New York State taxpayers and jobs. Buying our buses will support union workers and their families in addition to hundreds of New York component companies and vendors. This sustains and creates more jobs in New York while keeping our hard-earned tax dollars in New York. It also reduces negative environmental impact by shorter delivery distance, time, and fuel consumption. Buy New York, think green. Take
Please
advantage of better
comment.
after-the-sale service and parts by New York State vendors or workers. We're here for you. And in summation, if you buy our buses, it encourages prosperity investment in the state of New York. So keep the majority of your fleet Orion. Why not keep a good thing going? We do respect your decisions. We respect all of you people on the board. But please take a closer look at your good friends and neighbors right here at Orion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Denise Richardson, then John Samuelson, Bob Crow, and Izzy Rivera.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Denise Richardson. I'm the Managing Director of the General Contractors Association, but I'm also a system rider. And I'd like to talk to you about what it seems from the rider's perspective of what's happening and the message that I think that needs to get out to everyone. Last year, the legislature passed a plan that included the payroll tax increase, which is extremely unpopular to businesses. It included a plan for a fare increase, which is what's on the table today. And it also included a commitment to continue to maintain a state contribution from Albany. And that did not happen, and that's what led to the service cuts. And that's what I think that the public is not seeing. And as they talk about this fare increase, they see it as another speaker mentioned, you cut my service and now you're raising my fares. And as we talk about this fare increase over the next several months, the important discussion to be had is the distinction that needs to be made between what this fare increase represents, which is putting the MTA on a level of financial stability going forward, versus the service cuts that had to be made in response to an unprecedented, basically robbery of the MTA's funds by the state legislature earlier this year. And I think that that distinction going forward needs to be made in the mind of the public, because the question that everyone has to ask themselves is, if this fare increase does not go forward, what are the options for the MTA? And it's unrealistic for us as members of the public to say that the MTA can meet its financial plan obligations simply by cutting administrative staff. And so as we discuss this fare increase over the next several months in the public hearing format, the real question needs to be, in lieu of the fare fare increased, what are our other options? And until you have an answer to that, and a reasonable, thoughtful answer from the public, I don't think you have much of a choice. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker, John Samuelson. Then Bob Crow.
Good morning. I want to speak first about the published reports yesterday that the MTA Norman, how are you doing? Good, brother. How are you? Good, very good, brother. I want to talk about the concept of net zero raises for transit workers moving forward. Now, there's a great irony to this when the chairman of the MTA Board himself is bringing in about $450,000 a year in wages and benefits off the backs of New York State taxpayers. But the deficit problem at the MTA is expected to be, the gain is expected to be reaped off the backs of New York City transit workers who are barely making it as it is. Now, look at the composition of this board and look at the composition of New York City transit riders and New York City transit workers. Now, it's my belief that the members of this board, by and large, are completely out of touch with what it's like to be a working New Yorker, trying to raise a family in New York City, trying to make ends meet, trying to buy a house at $55,000 a year. I'm sure that none of the folks on this board, men or ladies, have any problem, well, except Norman. Norman's a working man. But the point I'm trying to make is that the woman who spoke before me said what the notion was of New York City transit riders and what their perception is. You know what their perception is, New York City transit riders that we interact with every day? Their perception is that a bunch of rich guys on the MTA board have hijacked their system, engaged in massive service cuts, and now they're facing a fare increase to boot. That's their perception. And when the chairman of the MTA board is making $450,000 a year, it's hard to justify to a rider or to a transit worker that the burden should be on transit riders and transit workers. It's utterly ridiculous, it's hypocritical, and it has to end. You can't make $450,000 a year and attack the salaries of New York City transit workers. It doesn't mix. It doesn't work like that. Leadership starts at the top. Step up. I don't see you taking a pay cut. I don't see you suggesting that $350,000 a year is too much money to make.
Please conclude, Mr. Samuelson.
When a track worker is making $27 an hour, step up. Leadership starts at the top. Give yourself a pay cut. Go after your own pension. Go after your own medical benefits.
Thank you, Mr. Samuelson. Bob Crow, followed by Izzy Rivera and Maurice Jenkins.
Thank you. My name is Bob Crow from the British Railway Maritime Transport Workers Union, representing 80,000 people in Great Britain. I've been invited to be over here for the Transport Workers Union Health and Safety Conference and had the opportunity to ask a few questions. Now, the chairman, Jay Warder, who I used to serve on the board with at Transport for London, nice to see you, Jade. You don't look too happy this morning for some reason. You know that feeling you get when you fall in love? You know that feeling when you've met someone, you fall in love? All of us probably had it at some time. Well, I see you, Joe, I feel the opposite. I don't fall in love. Because your plans in London, when you was the accountant out there for the Transport for London board, all ended in disaster. Your mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, was kicked out. Your chairman, Bob Kiley, who used to be the chairman over here, was kicked out. Tim O'Toole left, and yourself left. And all those plans that you said that we was going to rejuvenate London all disappeared. Now, all I'm going to say is this, is the affairs of the New York subway are a matter for New York citizens and American citizens. However, I would say this, that your system is very same as our system. It moves millions of people around the system. And I've got to say that you're either going to look at your system as a social system, or you're going to look at it about how it makes money. You know, when we had the bombs that went off in London, all of the underground metro workers was classified as heroes because they recognised the fact that the system was one that could be put under attack by terrorists. And as a result of that, generations of people have seen that what they really want to see is loads of visible staff working around the job. They want to see service improvements. And basically, as I see what your plans are, Chairman, is one, that you want to cut services for the most vulnerable. The people that you'll cut the services to, the first trains in the morning, the last trains at night, the ones at the weekend, will be more than likely doctors or essential workers who absolutely rely on transit networks to get them to work.
Kindly summarize your
I will
comments.
summarise my system. I believe that your cutbacks and your raising the fares have been a disaster. I accept there's some good people who are doing some good work on this board, but really, board members, you should hang your heads in shame if you expect workers to pay the cost for the financial crisis created by the bankers down the road who have walked away scot-free and still get their bonuses, and also the people of New York who are going to have a worse service. So therefore, Mr. Walder and Board, I'll ask you to look at yourselves in the mirror when you wake up in the morning, and don't look at your paychecks, and don't look at your bonuses, and start providing a service for the people of New York, and don't let New York metro workers pay the price for the crisis of the bankers down in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Izzy Rivera. Izzy Rivera, followed by Maurice Jenkins and Pat Bowden.
Today we're witnessing a tragedy in the making. Today you have the power, but you choose not to use that power. You choose to rubber stamp a bureaucracy that, like my brother Bob Crow and my president has stated, it's a power that you choose not to use, to take the labor cuts on the back of the working people, the people who need it the most, the people who drive in the morning, who go to work at 4 in the morning, those first responders will be put in harm's way. They'll be put in harm's way because this board will voluntarily rubber stamp the president of the board, Mr. Walder. I ask you today, stand aside, make a difference, make that choice. You have the freedom to do it. You can't say, we don't agree, we don't want this to happen, we don't want terrorists to take advantage of our city and our citizens. Today, not only is New York watching, but the world is watching. Mr. Crow is here. We have representatives from other parts, other metro unions in the world. So you will not escape your actions on what's happening today. It will not go unnoticed. And you know what? Someone even higher may be watching. So we will have to answer to the actions today and going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Maurice Jenkins, then Pat Bowden, and Kevin Harrington.
Good morning. I've been before you many times for one distinct reason, that you possibly listen. You have your public hearings and the public comes out. They speak out. And a lot of them speak very eloquently. And I've been to the city council hearings and you say you listen. But if you truly listen, why don't you implement? When people tell you that they want service, that they need security, why don't you implement? I read a document that said you found $49 million so you don't have to cut that 10% off of your higher workers' salaries. But you're $800 million in the hole. How can you find $49 million if you're still $800 million in the hole? Where's the 49 come from? This is some creative math? It's something I didn't learn in school. Do I need to go back? I'm curious, sir. As we were at the public hearings and we had those individuals who you laid off, those 260 individuals, citizens of the city of New York, as a divergent culture as the city itself. We asked you to look them in the eye. Most of the people on this board couldn't. I think you realize what you do, but I don't understand why you're doing it. You want to implement a contactless Metro card, but you don't know how much it's going to cost. Where's the sense in that? In a capitalistic society, if you control your capital, you have power. Yet you want to relinquish your control of the capital to the banks.
Please summarize your comments.
What sense does that make? And all this for what? Do you remember the 50 people who died in London? The 700 who were injured? At what cost, sir?
Our next speaker is Pat Bowden, then Kevin Harrington, and Mr. X.
Hello, my name is Pat Bowden. I'm president of TW Local 252, who represents Long Island Bus. Last Tuesday morning, I was appalled to go and see the newspaper. Nobody called us, told us about it to begin with. It was horrible for my drivers, my mechanics, and everything else to wake up to see that paper, that you were privatizing Long Island Bus. I thought that was horrible. I think you're doing contracts, you're doing everything in the press. I think if you cut down on your administrations and everything else, there'll be more money for the MTA. I think cutting the services for the poor people that need the buses is a disgrace. It is a disgrace for these people that make minimum wage, and you're going to increase the fares. They can't afford it. They make minimum wage. My drivers make $55 a year. That is not enough to live on Long Island. It is not enough. Administrators can live on Long Island. People are living with their children and everything else. I think it's a craze that you're going to increase fares. And you are bringing the dollar vans, which are very dangerous, to Long Island. They're starting on Main Street on Long Island, Valley Streams, and down. Dollar vans, which are very dangerous for the public, and I think you should put more buses on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, Kevin Harrington, then Mr. X, Michael Ho.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kevin Harrington. I'm the Vice President for conductors, train operators, and tower persons. I'd like to reveal an example of real evil here is Mr. Walder, who has been inciting attacks on transit workers, which has resulted in more assaults and spitting incidents for train crews in the last week. We have almost double, triple the number of assaults because he has been inciting attacks on workers by denigrating our labor and minimizing what we do, and frustrated passengers are attacking my people out there, and this is all because of Mr. J. Walder. Thank you very much. Right? I have 25 years as a train operator. I'm one of the few transit professionals in here. I evacuated people on 9/11. I've evacuated people during blackouts. During blackouts, you have no motor power for the train, no air conditioning, no lights. During 9/11, there was no police. There'll be no police when you have system-wide failures. What Mr. Walder wants to do is he wants to remove station agents who helped me on 9/11 and during my blackout evacuations. He wants to remove my conductor, and he wants me to be out there in an overcrowded train with one flashlight to evacuate 700 people. Are you going to send your family down to let Mr. Walder run this system? Are you going to let Mr. Pendergast run this system like that? That's going to kill people someday? No. The train cuts are causing unsafe trains. The trains are overcrowded. The crews can't get back to help people even now. You cannot, this is a criminally indifferent homicide. You cannot run the trains like this. The bus service in the Bronx stinks. The people are walking to the trains. They're tired of waiting for the bus. I walk every day. I got tired of waiting for my bus. All right? The corporate model does not work. It doesn't work on Wall Street. It doesn't work in the closed factories across the street. We need the people of New York to run the MTA and to dump Walder and this board that doesn't know anything.
Thank you, Mr. Harrington. Next speaker, Mr. X, then Michael Ho, and Z. Quo.
I'd just like to inform you about the upcoming event on August 27, 8 p.m., 55 West 17th Street. You're all welcome to come. All right, I want to talk about the public hearings that were held in March. You held 2 public hearings per day at the same time. That was about the 4th time you did that. That makes no sense. You should be one public hearing per day, which is what you did in February 2003. And I appreciate what happened on March 3 in my borough, in which Douglas Sussman put these students in front of me and Joseph Masiglio, and I didn't appreciate the fact that Jay Walder let him do it. When I spoke, I said, if you want to put students in front of me, even though they didn't pre-register to speak, let me know before time. That was unfair. Hope he doesn't do that in the future. I couldn't testify at your April 22 public hearing here. I didn't know about it before time. I didn't testify at the July 13 and 14 public hearings because I was hospitalized between June 1 and July 23. But I'm back. This is my first time attending a board meeting since January 28, 2009, which is 18 months ago today. Glad to see you all here. But what I don't understand is, when you held public hearings in March, you talked about the budget cuts, which lines you were going to cut. And then you had some more in early this month regarding more budget cuts. Why didn't you just talk about everything in March? That's what I don't understand. Did you leave something out? I don't get that. That made no sense. You should talk about your agendas in the same month. I don't know when you're going to hold more public hearings. I guess not anytime soon. But I have your bus maps, and the budget cuts are ridiculous. Particularly the M98 bus. There's no service below 65th Street.
Please summarize your comments.
I'll sum up when I get around to it. As I was saying, the M98 bus is now doesn't operate below 65th Street. I liked it better when it was terminated 34th Street. Should have been extended to Union Square. I don't get that. What's the point? What was the point of all these cuts?
Please conclude, Mr. Rex.
You know, I mean, I was told you have several managers that you don't need. Why don't you just cut the managers rather than cut the service? I don't get that.
Our next speaker, Mr. X, will be Michael Ho, then Z. Kuo, and Judith Sheridan. Are those individuals here? Michael Ho, Z. Kuo, Judith Sheridan, then Murray Bowden. And please identify yourself for the record.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Michael Ho. I'm working for MTA for 3 years for lighting maintenance. I'm hard at work. I'm just last minute get a layoff later, so tell me you can lay off. No reason, I don't know. So why lay off me? So thank you very much. I lost job, I lost everything. So maybe the New York transistor system have a problem. Maybe next time give me answer for me can fix. I don't know. So I'm working harder. So just last minute get a letter to tell me lay off. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ho. Z. Kuo, Judith Sheridan.
Good morning, Board. I went to the public hearings, and you were all there, and you listened to everybody say how we needed the safety and security of the booths. This is also to the Senate passed Bill 8A1483. It's safety and security, and the Assembly is meeting tonight, and hopefully they will pass that bill at 6 o'clock, and the governor will sign it so that we can have safety, security to the public. I mean, I am still working. I'm slated to be laid off next week if you close the booths. I went to a security awareness training program at PS 248 where the gentleman from Homeland Security said that there is definitely going to be some form of a terrorist act in the subway. It's just a matter of time. And if you take all the stations agents out, that time may come sooner than before. We pay $2.25 a ride, and that's for safety, security, and service. A lot of handicapped people, a lot of tourists, a lot of people ride the MTA. How could you take away the people that help them, the people that give them directions, the people that make sure their trip is safe, and if not, call help for them. All right, thank you, and please, Board, vote against the cuts of the station booths.
Thank you. Next speaker is Murray Bowden, then Naringa Singh, and Ed Dacamilius. Murray Bowden.
Good morning. I first have to apologize for being here. I said I was retiring and I got sucked back into it. It's because of Veronique Hakem. She is going to become the next executive director of the New Jersey Turnpike. When I got that on my email, I saw that she reports to Jay Simpson, who's also the chair of New Jersey Transit. And since I was involved in the ARC tunnel, I thought I would go to a meeting and see what's going on there and say hello to Jim. I discovered that New Jersey Transit and Long Island Railroad are both buying bi-level cars. Why are you designing two cars? Because, in effect, Metro-North west of Hudson is a rebranding of New Jersey Transit. And let's, deal with that reality. It's New Jersey Transit. It's not Metro-North. Why are there two separate ticketing things? Because your service is going to be interchanged. Why are there two separate information systems? Why are there, it's now a universal thing. And then I decided yesterday to go to a New Jersey Turnpike meeting, and I went down there yesterday and had introduced myself in my black outfit. I noticed that there's 6 lanes on the Turnpike, and 4 of them are restricted to buses. You can't ride buses on the middle ones and on one lane on the left. That's crazy. If you want people to use buses and you want to, then you open up all of the lanes to buses. This is about mindset. The people are thinking as if this was 20 and 30 and 50 years ago. This is 2010. You need the buses to run all over. You're doing it on Fordham Road. It's excellent.
Mr.
I
Bowden?
followed the bus.
If you would please conclude.
It was my intention not to be here again, but when things are changing at this rate and the new ideas are coming in with the bus lanes in New York City, that has to be extended across the whole metropolitan area. It's good to see you all, and I wish you all a very nice summer.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Narinder Singh, then Ed DeCamillis, and Eric Alexander.
My name is Guo, line maintainer. I work at Subway 2 years and bus depot about 10 months. But now is lay off. MTA tell me and us the reason of lay off us because MTA have to follow in the New York City civil service law. Because our list number is very lower, I have to replace another body. It's okay following the law, but the law is equal and justice for everybody. My line maintenance list number is low, but I have another 2 titles, car inspector and single maintainer. Its list number is higher. But my car inspector number is 69, and single maintainer list number is 75. So following the same law, you can replace me out from line maintainer, but then you should replace me in car inspector or single maintainer, because this law is one, only one and the same one. So it's bypass my higher list number for car inspector and single maintainer is against the law. Thanks.
Thank you. Narinder Singh, then Ed DeCamillis, Eric Alexander, and Veronica Vanderpool.
Good morning, everybody. Let me tell you one thing, what they're saying, on the just cross the street. Maybe you cannot listen because you people don't listen even the hearing. They're saying that lay off Walder, lay off MTA. Maybe they don't know that if MTA lay off Walder, they have to pay $500,000 before his term, like 5 years. He's laying off a lot of station agent without paying anything because he is very clever. He took in writing. If you people lay off him, you have to pay $500,000. He doesn't care because if he take $500,000, you lay off because you have to lay off. That's sure, today or tomorrow. Then he will go to Germany or somewhere else and make there his decision and all these things. Actually, the whole thing, this is why we are in this situation right now. Our president, Mr. Samuelson, is a nice guy, but he is handling very lightly the whole issue. If I had been the president, you people would have come to me. We are coming to you and hearing and all these bullshit things going on, everything, everybody knows this is all fake. So if it's you lucky that you have a so nice and gentleman, this president, Mr. Samuelson. But we're going to win. There's no doubt. Mr. Wall, if you don't lay off Mr. Walder, he is here till 2015. That's what I have read so far. So after 2015, let me tell you one thing, that he's laying off all these stations, and we will be back in this MTA, and we're going to retire from MTA. That's sure. But he will be no more in MTA after 2015. So that's
Thank
what
you, Mr.
you have to
Singh.
make sure this.
Please conclude,
That's
Mr.
what it
Singh.
is. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed DeCamillis, followed by Eric Alexander, Veronica Vanderpool, Ryan Lynch, and then our last speaker, Gene Rushinoff.
I'm speaking on behalf of Eddie Camillus. My name is Celeste Kirkland, and I represent workers from the Maintenance of Way Divisions from Transit Authority. MTA employees work under some of the most hazardous conditions, which start at our reporting areas. Asbestos, vermin infestation, code violations, areas with no clean air. Simply stated, many of our workplace environments and maintenance facilities have not been renovated since the early 1900s. There have been an abundance of layoffs, including cable section, where we perform capital work pulling and installing cable. Many of our guys are on the chopping block to be laid off, yet the MTA continues to hire contractors at up to 3 times our pay rate. We support the supply of power throughout this system. You're laying off of the station agents, the eyes and ears of this system. It puts this system in jeopardy. Mr. Walder, you and your board's actions on behalf of the MTA are deplorable and show a continued disregard for the safety of our customers and the health of its employees. The humanity factor has been lost here. You have hard-working individuals who protect this system as if it's their own. You guys don't realize what goes on in the backdrop. It's not just simple as numbers. What the MTA needs to realize and remember is that this system can't run without us. You can sell all the smart cards in the world, but if we don't move, neither does this system. I have one question to summarize it. Do you believe that it is unethical for a board member, maybe Mr. Walder, to have been a salaried employee of a McKinsey group and to now preside over our smart card system? Is there an ethics violation here? Thank you.
Our next speaker is Eric Alexander, then Veronica Vanderpool.
Hi, thank you. My name is Eric Alexander. I'm the Executive Director of Vision Long Island. We're a smart growth planning organization. We're here today to protest the idea of a 30% Long Island bus cut. This is abusive to the 100,000 riders and 32 million riders a year, to an important system for Nassau County. It's insulting to the small business owners that have been burdened with a payroll tax. They also are facing other crushing taxes and their employees need Long Island bus service to get their folks to and from work. This is damaging to the smart growth movement that has over 100 smart growth projects across Long Island, many of them TODs, many of them designed to rely on Long Island bus service to get folks to and from, again, varying downtowns and get folks out of their cars. We know the discussion of privatization has come forward. We recognize it's changed the debate, and all ideas should be considered. Having said that, we should look back at the problems through the 60s and the 70s that occurred with the varying bus companies on Long Island and the oligarchy that created from that, and why the MTA took it over in the first place in the public interest. You've got a new fleet. You've got award-winning service. It's a vital service to Long Island. So what do we do? What are we calling on? We're calling you on the MTA board to scratch this idea from the list. Number one, work with Nassau County in a creative way, and the state, and also Senator Schumer's office has said they're willing to step forward and negotiate this on a long-term solution to keep Long Island bus moving forward. Number three, if you do move forward with this idea, we would like to see an independent economic impact statement as to how reduction of service will impact our economic growth in our downtowns on Long Island. Fourth, we'd like to see hearings on Long Island so you can hear directly from Long Island residents who are concerned about this. And lastly, we call on the Long Island board members that certainly care about Long Island and Nassau County in particular to stand with the riders and the business owners that are frustrated with this potential loss. And we're here today with the Tri-State Transportation Campaign, Long Island Business Council, Long Island Fed is with us, and many other groups. So thank you.
Thank you. Veronica Vanderpool. Then Ryan Lynch, and our last speaker, Gene Rushinoff.
Good morning. My name is Veronica Vanterpool, and I'm speaking on behalf of Ryan Lynch as well with the Tri-State Transportation Campaign, a regional policy watchdog organization. The Tri-State Transportation Campaign cannot support the MTA's proposal to raise fares in 2011. In 2009, we supported an overall funding package that included fare increases in 2009 and 2011. But since that funding package has fallen apart, the state stole $143 million earmarked for the MTA, and revenue from the funding package came up short. Cuts still went into effect, and riders are still paying more than their fair share. It is inequitable to keep asking transit riders to contribute more to the system while drivers who reap the congestion-busting benefits of our transit system can still travel into the densest city in America for free. On average, transit riding households in New York City have incomes that are about half of those households with cars. It's time to reconsider East River Bridge tolls or congestion pricing with cashless electronic tolling and no toll booths as a more equitable solution to our transit funding woes. And it's time to consider new ideas such as a $1 MetroCard surcharge, which will raise new revenue and stop the wasteful practice of toss-away fare cards. You can't just blame the MTA. Blame Albany, blame the City of New York, blame Congress for not passing a $2 billion emergency transit funding package. Elected officials who simply point fingers at the MTA are dodging their responsibility to ensure our region's transit service remains safe, affordable, and reliable. Voters angry about the recent service cuts, bus riders, especially on Long Island, should ask candidates how they plan on dealing with the MTA's financial crisis. We are deeply concerned about the future of LI Bus. The MTA has proposed cutting its entire contribution to the system, $40 million. It will decimate the system and leave riders stranded. Instead, the MTA and Nassau County Executive Mangano should give greater priority to regional bus, an option supported by Mangano's predecessor, Thomas Swazi. The MTA's decision to cut its contribution is especially hasty, given the next capital plan, which already has state approval, includes funds for regional bus studies.
Please summarize your comments.
Furthermore, County Executive Mangano's proposals to privatize LI Bus should be retracted. Is this what County Executive Mangano wants for 104,000 daily LI Bus riders? The system was once privatized in 1973. It was a failure. We don't want to see that for LI Bus riders moving forward. There's still time for other options. These are unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Ryan Lynch, to be followed by Gene Rushinoff.
No, Ryan.
No, Ryan Lynch. Okay, Gene Rushinoff, Strap Hangers Campaign.
Good morning, MTA board members. I'm Gene Rushinoff with the Strap Hangers Campaign. The Strap Hangers Campaign is greatly concerned about the fairness and impact of the proposed fare hikes for 2011 on city subway and bus riders. Riders are being asked to pay more for less, given the tens of millions of dollars in service cuts the MTA just put into effect in late June. Coupled with the fare hikes in 2008 and 2009, we're concerned that the combination of fare increase and service cuts means the riders will likely end up paying a higher share of the costs of running the system. Not only more money, but more the burden of operating the system. Now, a fare increase in 2011 was part of a deal that we believe has fallen through. That deal called for various beneficiaries of transit to contribute to the MTA, including riders, drivers, and employers. Like many other groups in 2009, we supported the deal and the fare increase. Unfortunately, the deal has fallen through, with riders being hit with the worst service cuts in decades, the state legislature cutting $143 million from the MTA, and the sharp downturn in the revenues coming from the new dedicated taxes. The Strap Hangers Campaign agrees that the MTA has serious financial problems, and we also agree that you've taken serious steps to try and address them through administrative reductions and renegotiating contracts with vendors and consolidating many of your services. Are there realistic alternatives to a fare increase? Why, for example, should transit riders pay, as I do, to go from Brooklyn to Manhattan when drivers on the Brooklyn Bridge in Manhattan and Williamsburg Bridge go for free? Now, is it realistic to expect help in 2011? I think that's the toughest question for people like me. In 2010, we did not get a good reception in Albany, and we did not get a good reception in Washington or at City Hall, and things are likely to get worse in 2011. And that's something that we will struggle with in the next upcoming weeks and months. Anyway, as these issues are going to be debated, let's hope for a robust debate where the agency provides the copious data you have on MetroCard usage and on the demographics of who uses what fare instrument. I think it's worth discussing and debating it at length. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have one last speaker, Kevin Corbett, Regional Planning Association. Mr. Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman, board members. Kevin Corbett, as the standing in on behalf of Bob Yarrow, who can't be here. I'm Executive Committee board member of the RPA. The RPA supports the increase in principle and looks forward to working and commenting with the MTA on the pros and cons and the various options that are under consideration. But we think that it's important that despite these tough times, it's a very tough time for increases. The cuts are very painful, but to not go ahead with the increase would be incredibly irresponsible. The impact on the system without that kind of funding would be devastating and have a significant adverse economic impact. And as such, we support the increase. The RPA supported as part of ESTA, supported the increases, the Ravage plan, which intended everyone to step up to the plate. And as several other speakers have commented, the service cuts are certainly very badly timed with the same time you're asking for an increase, but the reality is that the service cuts were forced upon Albany. And for people who are looking to take shots at the chairman or at the MTA, they are looking at the wrong spot. Albany pulled back funding that was dedicated funding that should have gone to the MTA, has gone elsewhere, and that, people should hold Albany accountable. We're also concerned about the capital plan. Although that's out, the huge gap in the capital plan also looks at where do we deal with Albany, where are responsible elected officials, and helping craft a positive solution, bring in the efficiencies needed, which the MTA is to be lauded for unprecedented steps it has taken so far. They're certainly difficult, but they're to be congratulated on taking those steps. But those steps alone will not fund the capital plan. We need to work both with Washington and Albany to find real solutions, so to stop sort of the charade that currently goes on. In closing, we also noticed, Newsday and others also picking up, and we hope that drumbeat does continue, and we look forward to working with the MTA. ESTA will be having a meeting, Empire State Transportation Alliance will be having a meeting early this afternoon to go over some of the details that are in the material distributed downstairs, and we'll be coming out with a statement later today from ESTA as well. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank all 23 public speakers. That concludes today's public speaking session.
Doug, thank you, and thank you to the public speakers. As a first order of business, if I may welcome Diana Ritter. Diana Ritter has joined the MTA as our new managing director. She will, Diana's there, wave, there we go, we got her. Diana will oversee and implement our consolidation agenda. She will also have the responsibility for managing the day-to-day operations at headquarters, all with a focus on reducing our costs. I've had the pleasure now to work with her for about 10 days. I think we'll see quick results, and welcome aboard. Turning to the agenda at hand, can I ask for a vote to approve the minutes of the June board meeting? Do I have a second? In favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Report from the Committee on Finance. Andrew, please.
There are two action items. The first action item seeks authorization of the Transportation Revenue Commercial Paper Program to finance existing approved transit and commuter capital projects as further described in the staff summary. The second action item seeks approval to file for and accept federal grants for federal fiscal year 2010 and 11. Mr. Chairman, I move all of the action items.
In favor? Opposed? Thank you.
There are 12 procurements this month. There are no non-competitive procurements this month. There are 12 competitive procurements in the amount of $7,050,000, and there are no ratifications. I move these procurements.
In favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
There are 8 real estate action items this month, which are described in the board materials and handouts. I move these action items.
In favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Jay, that concludes our report.
Thank you very much. We turn to the report from the Committee on Transit. Doreen, please.
Good morning. There are 3 action items. One seeks approval to enter into an agreement with, among others, the American Public Transit Association and a not-for-profit organization, the Transportation Learning Center, to develop, through a cooperative agreement among several transit properties, a complete instructional program for transit elevator escalator maintenance. Another action item seeks approval to add the law firm of John McCormick, P.C. to the panel of firms representing the authorities in workers' compensation matters and related litigation. And finally, an action item seeks approval for additional funding in the amount of $277,200 for design services for 250 East 87th Street. I move the action items.
In favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
There are 12 procurements totaling $69 million. 3 are non-competitive in the amount of $2.3 million. The committee recommends them, and I move them.
In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
4 are competitive in the amount of $56.2 million. These are also recommended, and I move them.
A second? In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
And finally, there are 5 ratifications in the amount of $10.5 million. Once again, the committee recommends them, and I move them.
In favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
That's it for transit.
Okay. Thank you very much. The report from the Committee on Bus Operations. Nancy, please.
There are 2 non-competitive procurements for the amount of, what is that? 13, it's wrong. I'm sorry, I apologize.
Wrong.
The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
In favor? Opposed? Thank you.
There are 6 competitive procurements in the amount of $66.69 million. The committee also recommended these procurements, and I move them.
In favor, please? We have a discussion?
Yeah, with regard to the discussion you had on Monday with the bus procurement, Nancy made very strong points with regards to mean distance between failures being the driving force behind your decision to go with New Flyer instead of Orion. And you had testimony came forth today that you were correcting the numbers with regard to mean distance between failure. It could be those statements from the, whatever that is, podium, were incorrect. I do not know that, but they did bring that forth. The only real reason you know, Nancy very correctly stated the importance of mean distance between failure. They've corrected that statistic now, so I suggest perhaps you should be reconsidering that bid.
Norm, thanks for bringing this to our attention. While the gentleman was speaking, I was actually emailing Joe Smith and asking him about those new figures. And Joe, do you want to?
Joe, do you want to come up or do you want to speak,
Sure.
please?
Some of the if you're comparing 1999s to 2003s, the New Flyer, which was 4 years older, outperforms the Orion bus from 2003 with its MDBF. Also, some of the figures that were cited there included Long Island bus numbers, which are brand new and in a totally different duty cycle, that manage to, when you're out on Long Island, your speeds are greater and your distances are greater, and your MDBF will be higher, but because of that. But the older bus, the older New Flyer bus, outperformed the newer Orion bus.
So you're comparing
1999
apples
versus-
to apples?
Yes. If you compare a 1999 to a 2003, the older bus, it outperformed it. But it's not only MDBF. I think you got to look at the entire package. You got to look at the entire the way the bus lives. We keep buses for a long time here, so you can't look at 1 year. You got to look at the whole bus's life over 12 years, 14 years.
Well, you know, ideally you do keep the buses a long time. I mean, you want to keep them longer rather than shorter. That's certainly, most of the people I represent are maintainers, and the equipment has changed so much. I mean, even 2003 is 7 years ago, and those of you that deal with equipment on a daily basis, and I know Nancy does, know the substantial changes that have gone in just in the last couple of years with natural gas, and certainly with the new diesel stuff. It's much different equipment than it was in 2003, and I suggest that they made a compelling case, and you should consider it.
Also, Doreen made a very good point in the meeting discussing the New York State content. And there's a letter in front of the board members clarifying that. So I didn't know.
Well,
Doreen, are both of you satisfied with that?
Well, actually, no. I mean, I find that to be kind of...
Excuse me.
Sorry.
Can we give Doreen a chance to answer the
go
question
ahead.
first, Norman?
I apologize.
No, I think my concerns on content were well satisfied by the documentation that Joe provided. What continues to trouble me is the enormous number of fleet defects with the Orion fleet, both the NG buses, the CNG buses, and hybrid fleets. Daimler doesn't seem to have a solution for the 100 radiators that have had to be replaced on an 852 bus relatively new order. There are problems with engine cooling sensors, a fuel issue with the engines, air compressors on the brakes, the bellows don't work. There's a very long list of structural defects with these buses, and it is my understanding that while Orion has fixed some of them, they've been put back on the street only to break once again. In other cases, they have quite frankly been resistant. There are repetitive engine cradle defects that they are not acknowledging any culpability or responsibility for. I certainly want us to buy New York content, but I don't want us to buy defective content, no matter where it's manufactured. And that's my concern, that this has not been a company that has played fair with us in terms of fixing the defaults in these buses.
Well, and that's basically all I'm looking for is fairness in the situation. Now, the laundry list of mechanical errors or defects there is certainly something that Orion should address, and I assume on some level they have, or there would have been some sort of litigation. Perhaps there has been, and I don't know. Now, with regard to the New York State content, however, which I thank Nancy for bringing up that I forgot to mention that element of it, it's been a very important driving force in Albany, connecting with the upstate manufacturing centers. And while there is certain New York content in absolutely anything made on the planet, that can be listed, and that was listed in the New Flyer letter as well. That is superficial when compared to 600 jobs in a basic manufacturing plant in a upstate Riscony. And that's about all, I just wanted you to give full consideration to it. If you're satisfied you have, I know you're going to vote the way you're going to vote. I hate to see an opportunity to use more New York workers lost.
Thank you. We have I'm sorry, Doreen, yes.
Just one other point. I think it should be underscored that 60% of the buses that we run are Orion buses, so we certainly have given them a fair shake. I'm very happy that Nova has now put manufacturing facilities in Plattsburgh, and I hope that we're going to be seeing more orders from them. And we certainly welcome New Flyer if they choose to relocate to New York State. It would be a wonderful thing.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Mark.
I think it's also worth pointing out that, this is not the last group of buses that the MTA is going to be purchasing, and we very much hope that Orion will continue to be a major supplier and that they will address the problems that we have asked them to address for some time on various of their products, and that we'll again be in a position to recognize their competitive offers and in the future buy product from them as well as other bus companies on the basis of the merit, and obviously taking into account the New York-based issue. I thought it was interesting in terms of the question of how much of a given vehicle is credited to a given location, that the New Flyer, although not as high in New York content as Orion, is I think 13+ % instead of 18, but further that the new Flyer bus is 72% U.S.-based, while the Orion bus is about 60% U.S.-based. So the different ways of looking at this issue of how much is built where and what the impact is clearly complicated. That's something to look at.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Opposed? I'm sorry. Thank you very much. We turn to the report from the Metro North and Long Island committees. Jim, I think it's your turn.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. The on-time performance of all of our railroads.
Jim.
The on-time performance of all the Metro, all the MTA railroads this month averaged 95%. There are 3 action items this month. The first action item seeks approval to modify or increase parking fees at station parking facilities that are owned and controlled by Metro North and the Long Island Railroad to take effect on December the 1st, 2010. The second action item seeks approval to allocate $15.5 million within the Metro North 2005-2009 capital program to the Croton Harmon and Peekskill project to fund construction of critical station rehabilitation work at these 2 stations. The third action item seeks approval to utilize $385,000 from the Long Island Railroad 2005-2009 capital program for parking and a state of good repair work at Long Island Railroad's Stony Brook and Kew Garden stations. These were discussed at committee, and I move all the action items.
Second.
Discussion?
Item, Chairman, on the increase in the Mineola parking, I think it's just 3 points worth noting. One is the increase to $6 is equal to the existing rate at the Village of Mineola parking. Second, the Long Island Railroad will provide an additional 8 hours more than the Village does. And third, the Long Island Railroad parking is covered parking as opposed to non-covered parking for the Village. Just wanted to put those points on the record. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I just wanted to mention on the Stony Brook and the other aspect, these are the first projects under the MTA mentoring program, and I want to congratulate the chair of the committee, Susan Metzger, for making that a major emphasis in regard to diversity and getting different types of companies involved in the MTA capital program. I think it's very, very important, and I think a very, very good first step, of which there will be many more steps as we go along.
I'm very happy you raised that. Susan?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It took quite a long while. But I also want to point out that all of the agencies, including Metro North and Transit, are implementing some of the new mentoring program. Today, you passed a proposal to allow for a small loan facility, which will also support the mentoring program. So we're well on our way now. The governor signed the appropriate legislation on July 15th, and it wasn't just me. It was a lot of people on this board who helped push it through. And a special thanks to Mike Garner. His help and his understanding and knowledge of the program was invaluable.
Thank you. And let me underscore, Michael Garner and I have had the pleasure of working with Michael since I arrived, and we have concentrated on the word results. And I think he's taken that up. He's making things happen. It's happening with all of our agencies, Susan. I think that point is incredibly well taken, because you cannot stand and treat this objective and think it's separate from what we do in our day-to-day business in our organization. If it is, it will fail. And it's been the effort that's been supported by all the agencies to be able to do that, and also a lot of effort by our capital oversight department with Linda Kleinbaum and Ron Saporito. Everyone working together. We still have an awful lot of work to make this a success, but I'm quite encouraged by where we are right now. We have a motion and a second, I believe. In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
There are 5 non-competitive procurements, 3 for the Long Island Railroad and 2 for Metro North, and a total of $5.329 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second. In favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
There are 7 competitive procurements, 1 for the Long Island Railroad, 3 for Metro North, and 3 for the MTA Capital Construction Company, in a total amount of $88.848 million. The committee recommended these procurements, and I move them.
In favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
There are 2 ratifications, both for Metro North, in the amount of $86,093. The committee recommended these procurements, and I move them.
In favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
This concludes Metro North Long Island Committee.
Thank you very much. We move to the report from Bridges and Tunnels. Mark?
Mr. Chairman, on Monday, the Bridges and Tunnels Committee met and recommends the following. There is 1 non-competitive procurement with a $0 amount. That $0 amount either beats or sets a world record. We promise not to give you too many more of those. There are 2 competitive procurements in the amount of $7.429 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them. There are no ratifications this month.
In favor? Aye. Opposed? I don't care what you said, that Ferrari guy. That's pretty good, Jimmy. Is there any other business, Mark?
There are no ratifications this month, and that ends the committee's report.
Okay. We have several other items that are listed under other business. The first has to do with subway station actions. Hearings were held earlier this month on the proposed closure or reduction in hours of 42 subway stations, booths, and the permanent elimination of 44 station kiosks, assistance locations, and associated subway station kiosks. Having received and considered public testimony on these station actions, the matter is now before the board for a vote. The staff summary and the resolution authorizing New York City Transit to proceed with the permanent implementation of these station actions appears in your board book beginning on page 178. Do I have a motion? Second?
Second.
Discussion.
We all know that the MTA has pretty severe financial limitations, not likely to get better unless certain things happen. This is one of the items that has been counted on as improving the MTA's financial situation. I have, and I continue to have, a problem with this action unless and until we have working intercoms in all places where the booth agents are being laid off and working cameras in those situations. I think we are putting our ridership, our customers, and our existing employees in harm's way if we do not have this set of eyes, at least until we have the electronic alternative. And I'm told that is not going to happen for, at least another 6 months or so. I would feel terrible authorizing such a move, knowing that we didn't do everything we could to keep our customers safe. Ultimately, when we get the electronics all set and a passenger can push a button and be connected immediately to the rail control center or the existing booth agent, and the camera identifies who's talking, and that sort of fail-safe system, that way at least we will have an alternative. But right now, the booth agent has a value. It can broadcast the description of a perpetrator to the police or to another booth down the line or to the control center, and I'm just really uneasy about giving up that system until at least there's an electronic alternative, and I continue to maintain that position. Obviously, I don't have a vote, but I really would urge you to think long and hard before you authorize this action.
I'll ask Tom to speak in a moment, unless if there are. Do you want me to have Tom speak? Doreen, did you want to say something? Or you want me to have Tom speak?
I do want to put Tom on the line on this because I did my own little personal odyssey of some of our subway stations and found, much to my dismay, that there were not working intercoms in about 5 of them. Now, by no means was this an exhaustive trail, but 22nd, for example, 22nd and Park Avenue, where the booth has been removed, the intercom button could not be depressed, and it was the only one on the uptown side. Similarly, 33rd Street, there is not a working intercom on the uptown side. Some of the other stations where I did press not the emergency but the help button, I did get a human on the other end of the line who identified himself. I identified myself as an MTA board member, and I was very pleased that I was not cursed at. And And when the system works, it does work, but a couple of things. I think there needs to be consistency in the placement of these intercoms in the station. There needs to be intercoms on the platform, not on the other side of the turnstiles, ideally in both places. They need to be clearly marked and identified so customers could easily find them. If we don't have that, we are not running a safe and secure system. And Tom, I want your assurance that we are not going to remove a station agent from a station booth where there is no working intercom.
That was the commitment that was made a number of months back, even precedes me. We are living with that commitment as we speak today. There are 943 token booth intercoms throughout the, passenger emergency intercoms throughout the system. They are checked each shift. There's a requirement for an employee to make a check of that intercom each shift. There are about 20 trouble tickets a day. Not all of them result in defects that make the intercom inoperable, but they're checked every tour, and then the repairs are done. The longer-term solution, as Andrew mentioned, that we want to expedite and bring forward in months, is one in which we have an expanded intercom system. At least one intercom in the non-paid area and 3 intercoms in the paid area along the platform, so that people are no more than about 150 feet away from an intercom. The intercom provides a number of different functions: security, safety, someone being pushed to the tracks, somebody falling to the tracks, or an immediate request for power off. And we look forward to coming forward to the board within the next 45 days. I'm pushing for a very specific scope, schedule, and budget for the implementation of this project in a very expedited time frame. And I don't want to come forward with a promise that can't be met.
Mr. Chairman, we have the money in the budget to make sure this happens.
We have the money to make sure this happens, and I think what Tom has said is correct. We need to make sure we have a firm scope, schedule, budget. I think the point that's being made here is that we will ensure in every one of the cases that we have working intercoms on our current standard of having an intercom right now. And I think I personally had an experience this morning, and I talked about this earlier this morning, where I walked into the station, I saw a blinking light on the intercom. I was unsure what the blinking light was, and all of a sudden I heard a voice from the other side of the fare control area, who was a subway station cleaner, who said, "I'm just testing them." And I was happy to see that. He was just doing it as part of his normal routine of what he was doing, and I think that is a normal routine that Tom was referencing before. So, yeah. Carl?
Tom, when these fail, as Doreen was just talking about, she found some, how do we know that the one has failed? From the person who checks it on every shift that you were talking about?
The existing ones that are in place, that's how the failures are noted. In the program we want to go forward, we'd like to have a self-diagnostic which would tell a remote location that the intercom has failed.
But right now when they fail, what's the response time for someone to get out there and to at least look at it and figure out what's the matter with it?
The response time would vary on each individual ticket that they get, but they're getting 20 a day. Some they may turn over in a day, some they may turn over in a number of days, depending upon the nature of the defect. But I could give you a history in terms of what the longest time is on some of these. I don't have it available right now.
No, that's all right. But somebody's out there right away to...
Absolutely. I mean, there's emergency alarms which are located along the right-of-way. Emergency telephones and these intercoms receive the highest priority because of the nature of the device.
So would you safely say that they're repaired within 24 hours?
Oh, not every one is repaired within 24 hours, I can assure that, but that's the priority that's given to it.
Okay. Thank you.
I just asked Tom one question. Tom, today, when you get a working intercom, who's on the other end?
In most cases, it's the 24-hour booth, but in some cases it goes back, I believe, to station command or the rail control center. And in the new technology, we're actually going to have 2 different buttons. We're going to have a button that is for emergencies only, and another button that is for less urgent information, so we don't have people queued in line in front of an emergency.
Is it your expectation that along with these new intercoms, there will be working cameras so that the 24-hour booth agent can see who's calling them?
We're looking at the issue of cameras, and I don't know the latest iteration in terms of where we're at with that, because in some locations we won't be able to accommodate a camera, but we're looking to try to do that.
Thank you. Susan?
I'm very pleased to hear that you have a procedure going forward that exceeds the one that we presently have in place. I think that's a very good thing, and it gives me a confidence. I'd like you to tweak it a little bit. It seems to me that our signage needs to be better. All of us were looking for intercoms on the platforms on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, and I found them a little difficult to locate. If you had stronger signage. And the other suggestion I would make is on our subway cars, we often have placards that give instructions to help us understand what do you do in the event you have to evacuate, be careful of the gap, all kinds of things. It would help, I think, if you had pictures of the new, especially the new intercoms that made people more comfortable with what to do with them. When I first walked up to one on Monday, I thought, what do I do with this? We need a little instruction here, so if you could kind of add that to your budget, I would appreciate it.
It will be part of the budget, because what we do know right now is the existing intercoms are not placed in the same location. They're not signed very well at all. The devices look different to one another, so you wouldn't necessarily know that. These will be uniform devices, uniform signage, and one element of the program or the project will be an information campaign to roll out to the customers where to find them and what to do with them.
We have a motion and a second. In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next item, we have two other action items under other business. One is the revised agency bylaws and travel policy. These were reviewed by the governance committee in a meeting on Monday. Do I have a motion?
Motion made.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We turn now to a presentation which is really to a joint session of the board and the finance committee. Bob Foran, our CFO, will be presenting the 2010 mid-year forecast, the 2011 preliminary budget, the July financial plan for 2011 to 14. This process of stopping mid-year to look at our budget to see where we are is a process that was set up by the board. It gives us an opportunity to do it. In some years, I suspect it may well have been a whistle stop. This year, it's anything but, given our financial circumstances. Bob, wherever you might be. There you are. And Bob will also be joined by Charlie Monheim and Frederica Cuenca.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2010 began with an unexpected and massive shortfall in revenues. Due to the state's economic crisis, MTA taxes and subsidies have fallen by more than $900 million since last fall. What you see here on the chart, the top line, a green line, shows the anticipated revenues and forecasted revenues from the November plan. The bottom line, the blue line, shows the anticipated taxes and subsidies at this point in time. The red area in between shows the loss of revenues going back from 2009 projected to the end of 2014, our financial plan. The total of that amount is $2.5 billion. Now, to put that in context, if we were going to try to recover all of that, I would be talking to you today about a fare increase that's 25%. Now, at another time, with another organization, board, we might have been talking about fare increases. But these economic times are different, and they demand a different answer. Our response has been to begin an overhaul on how we do business. We're looking to do things that haven't been done before. As you're well aware, we've eliminated 977 administrative positions. We reduced overtime. We've negotiated better pricing with our vendors. The top 50 vendors, we got 43 to come in with lower prices. We've eliminated deferred projects. More than half the projects in the operating capital have been deferred or eliminated. We've increased the efficiency of our paratransit operations. We've managed our inventory more efficiently so that we don't have money tied up needlessly. And at MTA Bridges and Tunnels, we've done a top-to-bottom reorganization. Now, difficult cuts were made. We analyzed all of our service, and cuts were made in the areas that would have the least customer impact. We've targeted cuts in maintenance, cleaning, and customer service. And through that process, we've eliminated almost 2,500 operating positions. Now, these unprecedented management actions will help us to close the 2010 deficit. At the top of the page, under cost reductions, you see these categories and the amount of savings that have been achieved this year or to be achieved within this year. Streamlined operations, reduced overtime, eliminated deferred projects, managed the inventory maintenance, cleaning management staff, operations and support, $200 million of cuts. Headquarters, agency staff reductions. That was the 20% headquarters reduction. That's the 15% agency reduction and further reduction in administrative staff and operations. 977 positions, saving $74 million this year. Wage freezes for non-represented employees. It was 0 last year, it's 0 this year, $14 million. Paratransit efficiencies, $30 million. Bus and subway service cuts, $32. Station agent layoffs, $11. And other service reductions, $18. In total of those items, in 2010, we will reduce expenses by $381 million. That $380 million, along with some other lower expenses, increased ridership, debt service savings, things identified at the bottom of the page, will help us close the gap in 2010. But perhaps most importantly, those actions taken at the top of the page that generate $381 million of savings this year will generate on an annual recurring basis over $500 million, roughly an average of $525 million a year. Now, why is this important? Well, every time we put a financial plan together, we're faced with deficits. And this shows what the deficits would be for this financial plan before we take any actions, but also after we lost the revenues that you saw in the first chart. So those subsidies and taxes have increased the deficit. So we're facing a deficit of $1 billion in 2011, going all the way to $2.1 billion in 2014. So let's see how the recurring savings are going to help us address this deficit. You can see on the next chart the savings that we're projecting in each of those years from the actions that we're taking this year. So clearly, the deficit is going down. Next, as part of the rescue package that you've heard, there was an agreement that the MTA would raise fares and toll revenues, in 2011 and 2013 by 7.5%. So you can see by the kind of darker shaded area, or excuse me, the crosshatch area, the impact of the 2011 fare increase, toll increase. And then beginning in 13, the polka dot lighter shaded area, you can see the impact of the toll and fare increase in that year. So in total, we've gone a long way to reduce the deficit. However, if you add up the red areas, during the financial plan, we're still going to be $1.3 billion short. So that really is the challenge. And when we first started to look at putting together the financial plan, we were asking ourselves this one question. Given the remaining deficits that we have, can we hold the line at the planned 7.5% increase in fare and toll revenues? Now, if the answer is yes, we have to ask ourselves two more questions. First, can we do it without cutting service? And secondly, can we do it without sacrificing the service quality? The second set of questions perhaps are the most important, because if we can't do that, holding the line on the fares while we're still compromising service really is going to be a hollow victory for us. What have we accomplished? You might ask, why is it important that we believe we hold the line at 7.5% revenue increase? Well, first of all, it was part of a package. The governor and the legislature agreed with the MTA that the fares and tolls were a key part and put it in place. The package also included other very critical aspects. The first, it was payroll mobility tax. We had the Department of Motor Vehicle fees, we had auto rental fees, and we had the taxi cab surcharge. Now, as you've heard in our budget meetings and our budget reports and finance reports, that money was expected to be $1.66 billion this year. We're going to receive $1.283 billion this year, a significant fall off. But $1.28 billion this year growing is a very critical and important part of our finances. A second point, this package gave us funding for the first 2 years of the 2010-2014 capital program, critical funding for us. There's a second reason that we think it's important to hold to the 7.5% revenue increase, and it's the human side of this. You know, with most people's wages not increasing in this economy, we just think it's critical that we take this into account and try to limit the financial burden to our customers. Make no mistake, a 7.5% wage and toll increase is a real increase to people when wages are low. And in fact, another point to consider, to achieve this 7.5% increase in wage and tolls, the actual ticket prices, so the Metro cards, commuter rails, and tolls for the automobiles, would need to go up somewhere between 8 and 10% due to the typical fall off we have because of elasticity when fares are raised. Well, what is it going to take for us to hold to the 7.5%? We believe it's only possible if, one, we continue this overhaul of the way we're doing business. You know, if we take our eye off what we're doing, that $525 million recurring savings could dissipate, so we really have to maintain our focus. And two, we have to work with labor to increase productivity and efficiencies. Charlie?
Bob has already mentioned that the actions that we've taken this year will generate over $500 million in annual recurring savings. It's important to remember, though, that recurring does not mean automatic. There are still management actions that need to be taken to assure that those savings are in fact recurring and that there isn't any sliding back in terms of those savings. In addition, however, we need to continue the process that we've started in terms of identifying opportunities to reduce our costs. On this page, we're showing you some of those actions that will continue. Those include continued consolidations and rationalizations of administrative functions, a continued focus on inventory and procurements. Many of you don't see the procurements that we hold back from this board and the actions that we are taking to reduce the amount of money that we spend, but that is showing up in the financial results this year and should be increased in future years. In addition, we are looking at our operations from a benchmarking point of view. We're comparing ourselves to like national and international properties and hope to identify those areas where there might be additional savings found. You saw some fruit of that at the CPOC meeting earlier in the week, where we've indicated that we're going to start taking a look at our overall track program, both from a capital and an operating point of view, to convince ourselves that the favorable results we're receiving are also done at a favorable price. So, from 2011 to 2014, it is our hope and expectation that we will add to the $525 million in annual recurring savings amounts that run from $75 million in 2011, rising to $200 million in 2014. The net result of that being that by 2014, we will be generating almost $750 million of annual recurring savings annually. With regard to working with labor to achieve savings, because wage and benefit costs represent 2/3 of the MTA's operating expenses, controlling wage and benefit costs is an important element of this financial plan. In order to control wage and benefit costs, the financial plan includes a 2-year net zero approach to wage increases. Net zero means that wage increases need to be offset by in collective bargaining by savings in the form of work rule changes, increases in productivity, and contributions and/or contributions to benefit costs. In other words, we are not looking at a period during which wage increases are not possible. We're looking at a period during which productivity has to offset wage increases. Following that 2-year period for each contract, the expectation is that this financial plan assumes annual CPI wage-based increases, and if we achieve this, the results for the financial plan will be savings ranging from $38 million in 2011 to $203 million in the year 2014.
There's something else to discuss. Since 1973, the MTA has operated Nassau County's bus system, while the county continues to own the assets and be responsible for funding its operations. In 2010, Nassau County, if it continues as it is, will be underpaying its obligation by about $26 million. This cost has fallen on the MTA. And if you look at what's happened over the last decade, the shortfall in funding from Nassau County, made up for by the MTA, has been about $140 million. Given the current economic climate and MTA's finances, we can no longer afford to subsidize Nassau County's funding responsibility. And so the financial plan assumes that Nassau County will resume funding its obligation. The next chart is a condensed version of the number one schedule that you have in your board books, financial plan books, which really shows our financial results from 2009, the 2010 mid-year forecast, then our 2011 preliminary budget, and then out years 11, 12, 13. I'll just make a couple of points. The first yellow line that you see there is the deficit that remains that we saw on an earlier chart after the $525 million recurring savings and also the fare increases. Below that are the items that Charlie mentioned, the additional recurring cost and the labor initiatives, and some other things that we will be proposing to help balance the budget. The bottom line, we are proposing a very thin margin surplus of $12 million to close this 2010 budget. That $12 million surplus rolls over in 2011, where we will have the fare increase if it's approved by this board, and that will give us a surplus of $67 million. That surplus, again, very small on a $12-plus billion budget, rolls over into the next year where we're projecting a $92 million deficit to continue. In 13, if the fare is approved at that time, there would be a $156 million surplus. Rolling that into the next year, you end up with a $141 million projected deficit. So what we're presenting is a very tight forecasted budget closing this year, a slim surplus next year, and out years deficits that recur that we will be addressing and presenting to you in the July plan of next year. Another area that we wanted to present is what's going on with our head count. As of the November plan, we had 69,762 positions. Through the actions that have been taken, you can see the number of positions that have been eliminated. Total eliminations, 3,470, to give us a projected year-end head count of 66,292, or a 5% reduction in positions. Well, look, this financial plan is not without risk, and perhaps one of the most important is the state's financial crisis. Our plan is built on the assumption that all the resources, that's all the dedicated taxes, all the subsidies that are collected on our behalf will be paid to the MTA. It also is based upon the fact that the economy, which is tenuous, will not worsen, because we do have very limited financial resources to accommodate. Labor settlements, clearly, as those are done, they could come in at a level that differs from the assumptions that we have in our plan. There are a couple of other items, long-term vulnerabilities. We have a $12 billion roughly cash expense budget. That's about $1 billion a month that we spend. We need a significant amount of cash to make sure we can pay our bills on time, even if our subsidies are coming in late. Through cash available, internal borrowing, and external borrowing, as we did in the springtime with the revenue anticipation notes, we've been able to make it through. But longer term, we do need to build up our working capital. And affecting that is the $500 million capital loan. If you recall in our May meeting at CPOC, we talked about a loan that had been approved by the board each year, taking non-bond proceed monies from the capital and making it available to help balance our operating cash flow on an annual basis. Every year we borrowed it, we repaid it back. And at that time, we said we wanted to start a repayment schedule so that money could be returned to the capital program by the time it was needed. Well, our financial situation is such that we cannot repay it this year, and it's tight for next year, but we built into the financial plan to repay it beginning in 2012 in 5 annual installments. And the last point has to do with our retiree health care cost, what people sometimes call OPEBs. The cost of our current retirees and future retirees from a health and welfare standpoint on a present value basis today is about $13.2 billion. We have not funded that. What we have been paying is the current cost of that, which is roughly about $350 million a year. The accountants would expect that we should put aside $1.4 billion. We can't. But what the board has been approving, and we have been doing since 2006, is putting aside roughly another $60 million a year to help fund that obligation. One of the things that we are doing this year to help balance the budget is we are foregoing that voluntary payment. So we will not make that payment this year, but we will continue in the financial plan to carry it forward.
Bob?
Yes.
Before you leave this page, the first bullet on plan is on the assumption all resources will be paid to the MTA. Is that assuming the payroll mobility tax will be paid to us on what was originally thought, on an ever-increasing basis, or on the same basis we're getting now?
It's the reduced basis. We've already lowered it. We lowered it after we got the revised forecast. And again, we lowered it again mid-year. So it's based on that as it grows. Holding the 7.5%, can you flip to the next chart? Holding the 7.5% increase in fare and toll revenue is going to be hard. As Charlie's mentioned, it's going to require constant focus by management on cost cutting. Again, if we take our eye off the ball, if our focus wavers, it'll dissipate. It's dependent upon wage and benefit costs that have to be stabilized. And again, how we handle the risks that are in the plan. And again, we believe it's a hollow victory if we can't maintain service quality and avoid service cuts. Although the plan is preliminary, you're not asked to vote on it today, we think that sticking to 7.5 is important. And we believe it's achievable if the assumptions that we built in hold and if the risks are avoided. Most particularly, the loss of additional tax revenues coming from the state. That's it. Frederica?
Well, a question really to the board. We can stop here and speak to this part, or I could let Frederica go through the fair policy. Maybe we should just do the fair policy and then come back to this. Does that sound okay? Frederica, why don't you take that and then we'll come back for discussion.
If I move this over here?
Okay. Oh, you can.
Try to make some space for myself. Okay. All right. So let's go through the fair policy. As we put together the proposal, we kept in mind the following objectives. Achieve the necessary increase in revenues from fares and tolls, but we also want to maintain ridership and mobility through the fare policy and toll policies that we adopt. Improve the equity in the fare structure, and that happens in 2 ways. Reduce the largest discounts and also minimize the increase on ticket types that are relied on by our lower income riders. Finally, we also want to make it more efficient to sell and collect our fares. For every dollar that we collect in fares, it costs us 15 cents to sell and collect it. We think we can get that down, and that fare policy can help us do that. We also are looking to simplify the options and to retire ineffective discounts. Okay. So let's take a look at the proposal for transit fare. The fare everyone is most familiar with is the $2.25 fare, but in fact, only 15% of trips are taken with this fare. This proposal holds the base fare at $2.25, which benefits our low-income riders who are more likely to pay the base fare. All other trips on the system are taken with some kind of discount. The most popular discount is the bonus pay-per-ride MetroCard. 36% of our trips are taken with this fare. In order to achieve the revenue goal, this proposal lowers the bonus. With a 7% bonus, the effective fare for bonus pay-per-ride MetroCard customers is $2.10. This preserves the discount for multi-ride purchases. Okay. All the rest of the trips in the system are taken on time-based passes, which offer significant discounts. So, for example, if you take 55 trips on a 30-day card, you will pay $1.62 a ride. And if you take 110 trips, you pay only 81 cents a ride. So we put together a proposal that has two options for these passes. A cap pass that has a lower price but limits the total number of rides that you can take, or an unlimited ride pass where everyone pays a higher price and customers don't have to worry about how many trips they're taking. They don't have to think about it, right? They preserve sort of the just go. With 59 trips as the average number of trips taken on a 30-day pass, many customers would benefit from a lower price. However, it may be that over the course of a year, different people are taking 90 trips or more, and so in general, people would rather pay more to preserve the unlimited ride feature. We're encouraging public comment on these two options. Okay. So how have we met our objectives of mobility and equity? Both proposals for the time-based passes continue to provide significant discounts for our very frequent riders, which does help to minimize the ridership loss. Secondly, the higher increase on 30-day passes makes it possible to hold the base fare at $2.25 and to have a lower increase for the 7-day users. Both the base fare and the 7-day passes are more likely to be used by our lower income riders. Furthermore, low income riders are more sensitive to price, so keeping the increase lower in the proposal helps to minimize ridership loss. As we mentioned, we want to improve efficiency in our fare collection. We print 170 million MetroCards a year. Many of these end up as waste and garbage in our system and in our landfills. By instituting a $1 fee for getting a new card in the subway system, we believe people will change their behavior. In fact, this is a fee that no New Yorker has to pay. If you have a MetroCard, you can refill it for free. You can replace an expired card for free. You can buy a card at the corner grocery store. That will not have the $1 charge. And we're also making changes to the system to allow people to reload unlimited or time-based passes. Right. Second feature of this proposal would also institute a 25-cent charge on the single ride ticket. This paper ticket is more restrictive than a MetroCard. It has a 2-hour expiration period. You don't get a free bus subway transfer. So it really doesn't have all the benefits of a MetroCard. If New Yorkers get used to carrying a MetroCard with them, they can get all the benefits of the MetroCard for $2.25. So we really want to move people away from this single ride ticket. Okay. We're also looking to simplify the options. We propose eliminating two pass types that are not used very heavily. The first one is the one-day pass, which is used for less than 1% of trips. And this pass is also associated with illegal scamming. It comes up quite frequently in the fraud analysis that New York City Transit does. So since a lot of people are not using it, we might as well get rid of it. The 14-day pass is only used on 2% of trips. And so changes, and also changes in the 7-day with a lower increase, they close the gap between these two fare instruments, and so the need for this is lessened. So we propose eliminating both of those. On the railroads, the average increase is going to range in price from 7.6 to 9.4. This is going to vary depending on the ticket type or the zone that you're traveling to. The proposal also includes a number of measures to improve the efficiency of selling and collecting fares. Mail-in ride and web ticket are very expensive ways to sell tickets, yet these customers receive a discount. If you join the gym or you sign up for cable, you get a promotion that lasts for a few months. This one goes on forever. Customers use this program for convenience. The proposal eliminates the discount but preserves the convenience of the program. You can still use it, just won't get the discount. The proposal also includes changes designed to reduce the risk of uncollected fares, which are increased by long validity periods and also by processing transactions on board trains. So first, we're going to propose reducing the validity period so it's less likely that an uncollected ticket would get reused. Also, handling ticket sales or changes to tickets on board trains is very expensive. To encourage people to buy the right ticket for the trip that they want, to make these onboard transactions such as a step-up charge from an off-peak ticket to a peak ticket would be rounded to the nearest dollar. This encourages people to buy the right thing, but also will speed up the onboard transaction so conductors can move on to collecting other tickets. Finally, processing refunds has a cost. The proposal is to institute a fee up to $15 to cover the costs of processing that refund. This is reflective of what it costs us to do that transaction. Finally, on bridges and tunnels, we propose a cash increase for cars, 50 cents at the majors and Henry Hudson, and 25 cents at the minor crossings. And Easy Pass for cars increases by 10%, and resident discounts increase proportionally. So this one's pretty straightforward. So timing and process. Today, you have before you a staff summary requesting that you authorize the start of the fair hearing process. We would hold hearings in September and come back in early October for action so that we have time to implement the fare and toll changes by January 1st.
Thank you. And thank you, Bob and Charlie and Frederica for the presentation. I'm told that this is the first time that the MTA has tried to do this much at one time, updating our financial plan and putting forth fare proposals at the same time. I think it is completely consistent, however, with the process that's now set out and the timing of the fare increases is there and gives us an opportunity, I think, to consider fare and toll increases in the context of our financial plan and the way that we need to be able to do that. I do appreciate that there's a lot that has been laid out and that there is room for discussion. So I'll take people, if you can wait to be recognized by me, and I'll get around to everybody and ensure that everybody has an opportunity to speak. Pat?
Mr. Chairman, thanks. I want to speak for a minute on behalf of the 30 million people who ride Long Island bus each year. The proposal with respect to Long Island bus, I think, is radical, fundamentally mistaken, costly, and socially unjust. I think it's important to provide some context. And if I could ask Frederica that you put slide 13 up. The context is that this is addressing a 10-year problem which began in 1999. I acknowledge the fact that since 1999, the county has reduced, because the Nassau County, and this is both a problem that occurred on both Republican and Democratic county executives, experienced its first fiscal crisis. And county aid over a period of years was reduced, and as a result, the MTA stepped into the breach. 2 points I think are important. One is we believe it's unfair and unrealistic to expect Nassau County to address this deficit in 1 year, especially given the fact that Nassau County is broke. I recognize the grim realities, of course, that the MTA faces. Second, as has been noted by a number of our public speakers this morning, part of the dilemma that the MTA faces as a result of a prolonged failure of support at the state level. That affects Nassau County and Long Island Bus as well. The reason I say this approach is radical is that unlike other service cuts with respect to the subways, the bus system in New York City, Long Island Railroad, Metro North, those will leave a smaller pared back system, but they will leave a system. This is a radical change because these funding reductions, given Nassau County's fiscal realities, will result in the end of Long Island bus service in Nassau County. That's both radical, it's unfair. Third, it's socially unjust. Most of the riders of Long Island Bus are low-income people who come from places in Queens, for the most part, or Nassau County, traveling to jobs at Winthrop Hospital or North Shore LIJ, or small, medium, and large-size employers throughout Nassau County. If the service is ended, those folks will not be able to get to their jobs. We've done surveys, and we believe that 62% of riders are actually non-white. So it's socially unjust, it's economically unjust. Fourth, let's talk for a second about the economic impact in Nassau County. Nassau County projects that there could be up to a 4% increase in Nassau County unemployment if Long Island bus service were ended, which is what the proposal on page 13 suggests. Fifth, there's been discussion this morning about privatization. One of the things, we're going to explore privatization, and we're very aware of the impact that it could have on our brothers and sisters in the union movement. My friend Pat Bowden this morning spoke about the impact it could have on her 1,000 members. I ought to mention, just for the record, and this is something that I went to college on a union scholarship, and that's important to me, and the impact of union membership allowing working men and women to survive in this city in Nassau County as a result of union membership is imprinted on me clearly. The county executive is going to look at privatization. We believe we've got a responsibility to do that. But as I mentioned to the chairman last night, we're also going to look at what I'll call virtual privatization. And by that I mean, if you look at Long Island Bus on a standalone basis, it's about a $130 million operation, which is about 1% of the size of the MTA. However, it's got 10 lawyers and 20 accountants and 4 or 5 corporate communications peoples, which if you multiply by 100 gives you about 1,000 lawyers on a system-wide basis and 2,000 accountants and 400 to 500 corporate communications people. I don't have judgments. I haven't been on this board long enough as to know whether those are appropriate staffing levels at an authority level. I can tell you if it means the difference between working men and women being able to get to their jobs in Nassau County or not. By virtual privatization, the county executive is going to look at maintaining the current operation, having a hard-nosed focus on administrative costs, but putting ourselves in a position where over a period of time, Nassau County can increase its contribution to the MTA when its finances improve, but also to allow the MTA to reduce over a period of time its subsidies. That could be a win-win for both. Last 2 points, Mr. Chairman. We're going to call and ask respectfully that there be public hearings in Nassau County, including in those communities most affected. Lastly, I want to say I realize that the subsidy that Nassau County receives is a item of great concern to the City of New York, to the County of Suffolk, to the County of Westchester, and probably all of my colleagues around this table not from Nassau County. We realize that. The county is committed when its finances improve. In the short term, we have made a proposal, and we're not going to negotiate this at the board table or in the newspapers, but we've made a proposal to the MTA. Jay and I spoke about it last night, and we're committed to both retaining the service and to obtaining, if at all possible, given our fiscal realities, a negotiated settlement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Biggest Mark?
I think that the issue here and the focus of the discussion thus far, which is that the MTA, the onus here is on the MTA, and whether the MTA is going to continue the service is basically wrong. I think that the focus here needs to be on Nassau County's responsibility to support the cost of providing bus service in the county. The fact is that other counties and the City of New York pick up the deficit in bus operations. The city pays hundreds of millions of dollars a year, in fact, to the MTA to pick up the deficit in the operation of the formerly private bus companies in New York City. And at the end of the day, it's not just Nassau County that is in fiscal difficulties at the moment. It's the state of New York and all the regions and subdivisions that exist in it. It's counties, it's cities. Ultimately, it's a question of priority in terms of what each of these governments chooses to fund of a number of competing demands. And I would respectfully suggest that Nassau County needs to step up to the priority that was so eloquently laid out and need to maintain the service of Long Island Bus paid for on an equitable basis within the MTA region.
May I briefly respond? I'll be brief, and I don't intend to respond to every comment. Mark, I understand and appreciate the comment. I think the reality is twofold. One is, as I suggested, the county has made a proposal to the MTA, and I expect there'll be dialogue back and forth. And we're cognizant of both the importance of the service and the responsibility ultimately of the county to do what New York City, the County of Suffolk, the County of Westchester, and other counties that are served by the MTA does. Second, the reality, however, is due to the fact we haven't had the enlightened fiscal leadership of Mayor Bloomberg in Nassau County over the last period of years, we're broke. And the ability to make a significant contribution in 11 and 12 is limited. But we have made a proposal, and as I said, we're not going to negotiate that at this table or in the newspapers, but we'll have dialogue back and forth. And I understand your position, and that's why I made my last point that I'm very focused on the position of the mayor and the city and Suffolk and Westchester and other counties around the table. Thanks.
Andrew Saul, please.
Before I get to the budget itself, I just wanted to mention something on the Nassau situation. Being a resident of Westchester, the B-line system, for those that don't know, is approximately the same size as the Nassau bus system. And I think in the end, a total regional bus plan really has to be looked at now very, very seriously. And I know Westchester would like to look at that too. But you have to realize Westchester right now is actually, in fact, getting about $20-some-odd million less subsidy than Nassau is getting for the same system. And the residents and the county of Westchester is eating that difference. So it's a real problem. I mean, it really is. And Westchester, as you say, Pat, is in just as bad shape as Nassau. I mean, it's a very, very tight budget. And we're in bad shape, too, very bad shape up there. So
it's a sad day. We're all competing to see who's worse.
Right. But I think, though, the end is that really the suburban counties need to look at a regional bus system and need to do it now. It's very important to do. Getting back to the budget, I think that I'd just like to say that since Jay's been here and the new staff and the old staff that's here, tremendous amount of time and thought has gone into the ultimate redesigning of the MTA, and I think that's really important because if you don't ultimately redesign the MTA, we are facing a real holocaust here, and I think it's obvious, and everybody can point fingers at whatever you want. There's not going to be another bailout from the federal government, from the state government. We're on our own now, and you have a situation here, we have riders out there, and I'm really compliment the MTA and not going past that 7.5% increase because there's a lot of people on the suburban railroads, the bridges, of course the subway system that just plain can't afford any more money. These are people that just can't afford these increases, and we have a responsibility to be sure that these fares don't go out of control and put people in a position where they can't get to work and can't feed their families. It's a very serious situation. I think this is a very tight budget, very well thought out, in my opinion. There's a lot of sacrifices here. It isn't easy for anybody to lay anybody off. I mean, that's a very, very serious decision. But the alternate is worse. And we have to be sure as fiduciaries of this system that we live very carefully with this expense budget because there's, as Bob said, there is not a lot of wiggle room here at all. As a matter of fact, it's real tight, as you can see. Just a few words going forward. From my personal opinion, I think that we need to obviously continue to modernize and consolidate the operations, as Charlie talked about, and I think that's really ongoing and will be ongoing, hopefully, for the next years, no matter what happens. The other thing is I encourage the unions to participate in modernizing the system. This can't go on. This fighting with the unions, with our workforce, is not a healthy thing. It's safety. Every other thing is going to get compromised. And the unions, I think, have to be reasonable about this thing. I think the board has to be reasonable to the workforce, but the unions are going to have to change the way they do business with the MTA. There's no question about it. This can't go on like this. And the last point I'd have to make, and it's something I know Doreen brought up last week at in a telephone conversation, we have to go back and look at the capital plan, because this is putting a huge burden on this thing long term. Everybody's talked about it. Every time we spend money on this capital plan, we're increasing the debt service, and this is a thing this is like a time bomb here, and it's one of the big reasons, and a lot of speakers talked about, that we're in this trouble. I think the board's going to have to look at these mega projects and the ongoing maintenance project and be sure that we spend enough time on the capital budget to be sure that there's not a nickel wasted in here, and it's realistic, because we don't want to run into a situation where we just can't finance these projects any longer. It's a different world, and I think it's very well done. It's very painful. It's a very serious budget. I've been here a long time, as you all know, and I think it's really, Jay has taken some very hard, very painful steps that have personally put him in a lot of jeopardy, as we've seen, and I think that this is important for this system and the riding public, and I'm very much in favor of this, and we'll have to watch it in the next 6 months how it goes.
I have Mitch. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, on the Long Island bus service, obviously Long Island bus is an essential component not only to Nassau County but also to parts of Suffolk County and parts of New York City, and I'm hopeful. The good thing about the Long Island bus issue is that it's not being decided today. It is a proposal by staff. We have a number of months to try to work out an equitable solution for the county, for the other users, for the subsidy riders. So I'm hopeful that we will be able to do that over the course. And from Suffolk County's perspective, we will participate in those discussions and hopefully reach an amicable solution for both the county and the MTA. And by that, I don't mean just a short-term solution. I think Pat and I both agree it has to be a long-term solution in that regard. So that's on the Long Island bus service. I think it's very interesting, the situation we're placed in today, notwithstanding the credibility or lack of credibility of the MTA, we are actually the only ones upholding the 2009 agreement. Everybody else has gone away and left us to our own devices, and we're the only ones upholding the 2009 agreement with the state legislature and the governor, in which we indicated we would do cost savings, which we have done and will continue to do, and we would hold the fare increase to January 1st, 2011, and 7.5% net. All of those attributes are in this proposed budget. We hope we can do them, but all of them are in there, and I think that's a very important step for the credibility of the MTA, and I want to thank the chairman and the staff for getting us to that point. There are lots of things in there I have issues with, but I think getting to that point is a very important starting point for the discussions over the next 6 months. What this all comes down to is one word, and the word is subsidy. The mass transit rider does not pay the full cost of the ride. The motorist subsidizes the rider, the taxpayer subsidizes the rider, and some riders subsidize other riders in that regard. And the question is, where in that context should we end up? And I think this opportunity over the next 6 months and the public hearings and everything that will go along gives us an opportunity, I think a very good opportunity, to have that type of meaningful discussion. Who should subsidize who and how much? Because in the end, that's what all of this is about when you run a mass transit system in the 21st century. And we can yell at the state government, and we can yell at the federal government, and we can yell at everybody else's government in that regard. but in the end, it comes down to one thing. Number one, what's the subsidy going to be? And number two, who's going to pay it? You get to that from two different perspectives. Number one, we have to do, and we have to continue to do, a better job in reducing the cost of the ride. And I think the situations that we have portrayed already that we have done and the other activities we are going to continue to do over the next 6 months and a year are going to enable us to say that we continue to reduce the cost of the ride. The next point is who's going to subsidize the rest of the cost if the rider doesn't pay the full fare. And as we all know, it's been the public policy of the state of New York since 1965 that the rider should not pay the full fare. And those are the discussions we have to take place. I'm going to be very interested, and I think the point out to the public and to the strap hangers and to everyone else is we have to raise $413 million in additional fares. That's the number that is up there. I'm going to be very interested in trying to find out from people how they think we should do it. We have provided a number of options, as Federica put out there. There may be other ways in which to do it. And everybody will obviously come to the point of the other guy should pay more, whoever the other guy is, and I should pay less. But that's okay. That's a useful conversation to have. And I think what we have in the next 6 months is a great opportunity to have that conversation. What percentage of the cost of the ride should the rider pay, and who should pay the difference? And I look forward to having that discussion over the next 6 months. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Don Cecil?
Mitch, you're absolutely right on talking about subsidies and who should pay, and I, for one, representing Westchester, don't see why we should be paying for Nassau, but we're an independent authority, and our county fully takes care of its transportation for its bus riders, of an equivalent system. Moving on to the budget, unfortunately, we don't have any kind of a real dollar reserve behind us in order to go through this fiscal budget that Jay and staff have worked very hard to put together, and I think the combination of both internal savings and a moderate fare increase is not only appropriate, but I think in light of today's environments, I think is quite well done and quite well put together. However, what we're dealing with is a source of revenue that comes from a cyclical revenue source, and it seems to me that for the last 30 years, the transportation system has been primarily funded by an inadequate, stable source of revenue. And I would hope over a period of time, obviously not before an election, but at some point in time that once again I have seen mention in the papers of thinking in terms of congestion pricing or whatever, but I do think, having just listened to the union president, that the question of being able to maintain what's in the budget in terms of union cooperation is going to raise a very serious debate internally between the unions and between management. However, I do look forward to the proposal after public hearings pretty much being put together in the way that it has, and I think it's the best that we can do looking forward under the financial circumstances.
I have Alan Capelli next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first of all, I was happy to hear the transit advocates mention the fact that the service cuts that took place were really not of our doing, with the state of New York essentially stealing $143 million for us and essentially breaking their part of the bargain with us. And I would hope that we don't suffer that same loss of revenue as we go forward, which is one of the risks as the state of New York continues to deal with its own problems. But hopefully we will make that radioactive enough and they'll understand the direct relationship between taking the money and buses being eliminated and subway lines being eliminated and token booth clerks being laid off and many of the terrible things that have occurred as a result of their actions subsequent to the so-called rescue plan that was enacted last year. As a member of the Finance Committee, I look at our finances regularly. I look at the revenue patterns and keep looking to see light at the end of the tunnel. And there ain't a lot of light out there yet to see. But I'm an optimist, and I'm hoping that things will get better. But we have to do that which we can do. And I think that there is no question that we need to live up to our end of the bargain in terms of implementing an effective 7.5% return, at least, in order to be able to go forward. I think that it's a relatively prudent position for us to take, and I would hope that when we put the plan before the public, that we give ourselves flexibility to be able to make changes and modifications to the plan as implemented that will allow us to do things that are not on paper here today that may make some sense to us and to be able to take advantage of what often are some good ideas that come from those who appear before us. So I would ask for maximum flexibility. That would also, quite frankly, if the situation turns financially more dour and our tax rates go down or the state does steal more money from us, I do not want to go back to service cuts, which to me is one of the worst things that I think that we can do as an organization. And, if we go further, we're no longer, we're going into a very serious parts of our system that I don't think that we can afford to lose. So I think we need to be mindful of that. And so please, as lawyers prepare these notices, and as I vote to authorize the public hearings that I guess will take place probably in September or so, and I'm hearing 6 months, but I don't think that we have 6 months to do this.
I think the chart said September.
Yeah, I think that we have to probably make a decision on this by October if we're going to get a net effect for January the 1st and be able to do the things that we need to do. Specifically, I think that the equity of how fares are paid is a conversation that I would like to have. People think, when I ask them, what do you pay to ride the subway? People say, well, $2.25. And I say, well, how are you paying that? And I don't think people really understand that a lot of people don't pay $2.25. We don't get $2.25. We get, depending upon the product that's sold, $1.60 or $1.10, or if somebody's taking advantage of an unlimited, to its fullest advantage, that they may be paying 80 cents. And what happens is that other people have to make up that difference, and so that in balancing those equities, that ought to be what these hearings are about, and where we draw the lines, so that the those who don't have aren't disproportionately paying for those who have money. So I think that there's a fairness element to this that we need to be very mindful of. I just offhand question whether the unlimited ride that we're talking about is enough in terms of what the actual cost should be, and people ought to speak about that. And whether or not we should have an either-or situation, or maybe both, with a cap at a number of rides at a lower rate and an unlimited at a greater rate as two options. And I hope that we have the flexibility during our hearings, if we decide that makes sense, to be able to move in that direction. I just want to take another moment or two to talk about tolls, because we all have a tendency to focus on the bus and subway fares in this, but there's also what I call the low-hanging fruit in our, or as Staten Islanders call the golden goose, our toll revenue. And it is an easy thing in some ways for us to do because it's within our control, but it also has a significant impact on people. And the amount, when we're doing the 7.5% or 10% increase on these tolls, it starts adding up to be a lot of money. In my view, the toll policy, not our policy, but toll policy in the region is discriminatory, is geographically discriminatory. There are people who get to go from one county to another and don't have to pay, or from one borough to another and don't have to pay. And there are people who live from my county who have to pay every time they go back and forth. I think the mayor was on the right track with the congestion pricing plan. I think there was some support for that last year in the legislature, not enough. And I would hope that transit advocates and others would focus on the inequities of the toll situation, where some kind of a standardized toll policy could be created that would maybe allow us to lower tolls and increase the base of tolls, making it fair, not affecting the transit patterns, so that people would have no incentive to run through certain neighborhoods as opposed to others, and would allow people to be treated the same way, which is always, I think, a good thing. Just one other point from my borough president proposed an idea yesterday that I think I would like us to consider. Borough President Molinari sent the chairman and myself a letter requesting that we look at the issue of charging people more, seriously more, maybe $1 more, for using not using Easy Pass. We have only 80% of our people who utilize the tolls utilize the Easy Pass. It's in the low 80s, and it just shocks me because it creates traffic congestion, which adds to the pollution, and it's certainly a higher cost for us to collect. And I would hope that we would give consideration to the borough president's idea, which I think, as I say, is environmentally friendly and may make some sense as well. Thank you, Mr. Ray.
I have Susan Metzger next.
First, I want to say that I'm glad to hear that NASA has made another proposal and is trying to help resolve this issue. I don't think you realize how much it has been grating to the other counties, so you've walked into a buzzsaw on this one. But I think that the lesson to be learned from it is that this board can't allow the MTA to be stiffed on services provided, especially for 10 years. And it's about time that we started doing something about this. I'm very glad to see that happen. I've agreed with many of the bigger picture issues that my colleagues have brought for discussion, and I will not reiterate those, but I have a couple of little questions. First of all, is this presentation on the web? It will be. And is the detail that's available here, it will be on the web as well. When you talk about the railroad fare proposals, these are actually very complex proposals that require tables and charts. Is that going to be on the web? I think each board member should receive that. I know we've seen them in the past, but I also know there have been some changes made. So the sooner you can get the final tables to each of the board members for each of the railroad committees, I think that's a good thing. And lastly, I want to agree with Commissioner Capelli. I think that actually, I not only think that it should be available, but I think that the way we've presented the proposal options for the capped trips and the unlimited trips on the 30 and 7-day passes is confusing to the public. It was confusing to me, and John and I had a number of conversations about it, some with Frederica. It would be at least informative for the public to understand what the difference would be if we could not only offer one or the other, but one and the other, because the cost difference is substantial that way. Without seeing that number, I don't think the public understands why we're looking for one or the other. So if that could be included, I would very much appreciate it.
Yes. Point taken.
And finally, I realize how much effort went into this. I realize how much effort needs to go into it in order to make it work. I appreciate the effort so far, and I think this board is determined to put in the effort that it would take to make it work. Thank you.
Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to reiterate what has been very ably expressed up to now, but simply try to reinforce a couple of items that I think should be reinforced so that we keep them in front of us as we enter into these discussions. I'll begin by saying, and I think that the effort putting this package together is quite evident, and I'm very happy to be the recipient of that. I think in particular the explication of a lot of the theoretical underpinnings that go into the creation of a budget like this is important not just for the board and its considerations, but also for the public in general, to understand how we're getting from point A to point B, as opposed to just having policy be issued from some oracle on high, and everybody just sort of lays down and has to accept it. And I think that the result of that should, and I hope will, be a robust discussion of some of these policy issues, particularly in the fare area, among my fellow board members, and also that we listen with real attention to the comments that we get in the fare hearings, because it as Mitch so ably said, it's a matter of who's subsidizing whom, and how we raise our money, and from the standpoint of the riders, what does it feel like to get dinged, and are we going about it the right way? So I welcome that discussion, and I thank you for putting it straight up in the materials that you presented today. The last thing I would raise is the comments in the risks to the financial plan, talking about our $500 million capital loan. Just putting my old finance hat back on. I see this as a step process, and not a good one. If we are borrowing from capital in order to make our working capital numbers, and now we are, in a sense, institutionalizing that through some sort of a payback program as opposed to a near-term, true revolving type facility, I am very concerned that we do not fall into the trap of mixing sources, and because it is a very slippery slope, and it can. And I have learned from long experience that is one slope we don't really want to be on. So thanks to the staff for this job, and I welcome the discussions in the future.
I have Jim Tudor next, please.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank Jay and the staff for putting together such a complicated, but yet I think reasonably clear projection as to how we should go forward. A lot of ifs, ands, and buts will be decided over the next couple months. I think there are a couple of things that we can look at, and I think are important. I've been here a long time, and I think this is the first time in that I can remember where we've drilled down this deeply into the makings of the MTA and come up with the savings that we have. So I commend them for that because it's long overdue. I also think that the fact that our union people, our represented people, certainly have to be part of the solution, and they can't be part of an added problem. So I welcome them to the table. The other thing I'm very happy about is in looking over our fare policy, we've really made steps to make sure that the people that have very low incomes are faced with very smallest increases. And we get back to the idea of subsidizing who, and I think it's important that we do have some responsibility to those low-income people, and I think that that's being taken care of primarily through our fare policy. As far as Nassau County is concerned, I think I'm on the same boat with all the rest of the counties. We pay our fair share. We expect you to pay yours. But what this does bring out, and I think is important, is that it pushes towards regionalized bus systems. And this is something we can't afford now. Okay? But at the same time, I think there's a piece of that capital program that says we can study it, and I think that that's an important step going forward, because I think you will be surprised in our outgoing counties that we have bus systems within our counties, but go from county to county is almost impossible. And to get to Jim's position on our capital loan, we're not going to extend this any further. The point of the matter is that we're eliminating this. This is part of the process to eliminate the capital loan. The fact of the matter is we'd like to pay it all back at once, but we can't afford it. So it's going to be wiped out over 5 years at $100 million a year, beginning in 2012, I believe. That's all I have to say.
Okay. I've got Carl Wardendyke.
Yes, I think that as far as the Nassau County bus thing is concerned, Patrick, I think everybody here, especially Orange, Rockland, Dutchess, and Putnam, we have a value gap in our, pardon? Did I say Alan? We have a value gap of about $60 million, and we're upset also with the new payroll tax that we have. And I think at this point in time, we're just going to try to hold everything the way we are and get through this time. I know that we've got the federal government, the state government, and the city. Everybody's in trouble, and we're not going to get, it's been said before here, get any subsidies or money from anybody to try to straighten this thing out. And I just hope that there are a few things out there that are open and can be looked at. And one is the congestion pricing, and others tolling the East River bridges. There's hope that we're going to get some cooperation from the unions. And there's a lot of things out there that I think we can still look at and visit. And one of the things I think that we should look at is that, the unions have been good. We can work with them. And there's a thing out there about the 62-year-old retirement thing that wouldn't affect anybody who is presently involved with any union. It would only be new hirees. So I think with cooperation from everybody that we have here, everybody's got their axe to grind. And that's how I think we should proceed. Thank you.
I have Andrew Albert, please.
I would also like to thank the chairman and the staff for putting together a really well thought out, very complex, layered approach to the problems that we're having. We would actually be well within our rights to not keep the increase at 7.5%, considering that the state did not meet its part of the bargain and took a lot of money away from us. So I think it's commendable that we're trying to do that. Unfortunately, some parts of the proposal aren't in the realm of 7.5%. For instance, the 30-day unlimited card going from 89 to 104 is a 17% increase, not a 7.5% increase. So, there are some, I understand that you're starting with a much higher base on the commuter rails, and you want to try to keep those increases down because we don't want folks to shift to cars, and I think that's a commendable goal, but we certainly don't want the transit rider to pay a disproportionate share. Speaking of which, I don't know what's so sacrosanct about the $2.25 fare. Almost nobody pays it. If that could be raised and keep some of the pass rates down, which the vast majority of our folks use, including poor people, I think that would be a commendable goal. I just don't see what's so sacrosanct. People are raising their base fares because almost nobody pays that. I guess it's symbolic, but I think we're penalizing our best customers, and we're letting the occasional user who forgets their MetroCard or a tourist who buys the single fare to get a much lower rate. So I don't think we should be doing that. I think the unlimited card should be preserved. I think it has unlimited benefits. I think there's a psychological boon to the New Yorker who has an unlimited ride card. They don't have to worry about how many rides are left. They just go out somewhere for lunch. They go out after work. They go out on weekends. I mean, it's just a wonderful thing. That's the way New Yorkers live now, with unlimited cards, and I would hate to see that go away. And I'm sure at the public hearings you will probably hear riders say that, while they rail against any fare hike, of course, but I think there's a lot of benefits to that. I agree with many of my fellow commissioners. We must start looking at, again, congestion pricing and tolling of the free Eastern Harlem River bridges. It would equalize traffic. It would cut down on fuel waste. It is so logical in so many ways. If the MTA got the benefits of those fees and put it in a lockbox that nobody could touch, I think a lot of our problems would melt away. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing all of the important cost-cutting things that the chairman has laid out, but I think that is really the way to go. And I really look forward to hearing from the public at the public hearings coming up. Thank you.
Thank you. Norman, before I turn to you, just to clarify one thing, the 7.5% was individually done, railroads and transit. It's not a cross-subsidization from one to the other. There is a question about products within each piece. So I think that's a fair question. I just don't want to leave an impression that there's a cross-subsidization from this between transit to commuter. Norman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we look forward to the hearings on fare increases, it boggles my mind that we went through all of these service cuts in different communities. Buses, trains, express trains, W, X, Y, and Z trains. And, yeah, you know what I mean. But it's almost like we're playing gotcha. Why couldn't we come up with these numbers before all of these cuts took place? And say, this is the number that we need in order to keep the system running, keep the people employed, keep the minimum wage workers working. No, we didn't do that. We whacked them all. We closed the token booths. We eliminated bus routes, eliminated train routes. We did all of this stuff. Now we say, now let's talk about raising the fare. What we should be talking about is, if the fare is raised, how do we replace and put back those buses in Staten Island that gets those senior citizens that are trapped in their homes back to Lower Manhattan to see a theater show? That's what we should be talking about. Now, I know as a board member, some of you can't stand me, but that's a good thing. I like that. You either love Norman or you hate him. There's no in between. At the end of the day, there is no in between. But we need to think about it because, you know, I would be the first one to say, and when the mayor came up with congestion pricing, I said, no, bad idea. But now that the poorer people in this city are facing more of an impact than the people that are more well off to do, I think congestion pricing is something that we need to take a look at. I think raising the Triborough Bridge or the Verrazano Bridge or any of the other bridges by $1, I could care less. It's a luxury to drive to work. It's a luxury to sit in your car or your Mercedes or your SUV, smoke a cigarette, have your coffee, don't have to worry about it, listen to any station you want, while all of the minimum wage people get on the subway, get in like sardines, passenger gets sick, the train stops, wait another 30 minutes for the ambulance to come get them off, they get to work, they have to hustle. So raise it for $1. Forget about the poor people. Raise the tolls $1. And then let them say, well, I'm not going to take it. Then you got a choice. You could get on the subway and pay a little less. But we have to do something besides every time you turn around, make these poor people suffer. They can't afford it anymore. The federal government says unemployment is 10%, and it's not going anyplace. And it's getting worse in New York City. The mayor's trying to put his thing together. The governor is fighting with the Assembly and the Senate. There's not going to be a budget that's going to help the MTA. But why are we taking and cutting so many services and now turning around saying, I've got this great proposal, and I've heard all the people compliment the proposal. Great proposal, but this proposal should have been done before we made those cuts. To be able to look at the number and say, this is what it's going to take for us to keep the token booths open, keep the buses in Staten Island running, keep the buses in Bay Ridge running, keep the buses in the Bronx running, keep the service going from point A to point B. That's what we should have did. And I think it's disingenuous for people to sit here and say, this is the greatest thing since jelly in a donut.
Alan, I think you want to say something.
Yeah, first of all, I'm not sure whether I want to, either swap suits with Norman or paychecks. As I heard, I'm a big admirer of your fashion style, and I'm in the first category. However, I do have to take exception with the notion that people who are driving are doing so because they have that they don't want to take public transit. There are parts of this city and region where we just don't serve, or where we've cut back, and people really don't have a reliable way in which to get to work in a reasonable amount of time. And we just cut out express bus services, and we put more people back on the road. And I feel like you have a situation where it's like, okay, let's cut all the bus service, force them into their cars, and whack them with the tolls. Okay, so. If there are lots of people who would gladly, get into a subway and get into Lower Manhattan, in 40 minutes or 35 minutes or whatever, and not have to stand out there and wait, for a bus to get them to the ferry, to get them to another subway, for an hour and 45-minute commute. So, I hear you, Norman.
I have Norman Brown.
Norman Brown. First of all, I won't compliment your PowerPoint. Power corrupts, and PowerPoint corrupts absolutely. But I think the main thing here, and I don't mean it entirely in jest, that part of what bothers me here is what I consider a insufficient and suspicious absence of outrage with regard to the $143 million swept off the table. Maybe this is a cultural thing. In my neighborhood, if somebody takes $143 from you, it's not sufficient to say, well, maybe he won't do it tomorrow, or maybe he won't do it the next day. And I suggest the most sure way that they won't take it the next time is to go back for it and ask for it again and again and again, and take it back from them in whatever means necessary. Now, in that regard, I don't know, one of you made the point, I think maybe Don, regarding the cyclical character of the revenue base. It's not unique to this revenue base. It's in the Bible, Ecclesiastics, to everything there's a season. I don't think there's a single revenue source, certainly not the fares, certainly not the tolls, that does not have a cyclical character. You can't wish it away. There will always be a cyclical character to congestion pricing. I'm quite certain as well. Nonetheless, the cyclical character of the politicians' ability to take $143 million off the table is really much more like what you have to address, because every time there's a political crisis, which I think we have a political crisis in this city, and or not the city so much, but the state, and I think we have a fiscal crisis as well. Each time one of these comes up, where are they going to look to take the money? From the chump that didn't fight them for it the last time. And I believe that in that regard, there are legislative solutions to this, that this money, the dedicated funds, should be dedicated in a stronger way. There should be in the lockbox. I know you don't like the subjunctive, the shoulds, the woulds, the coulds. I don't like them either. But we need, let's put it that way, we need legislative solution to this ability to sweep your money away and spend it on other more important, I guess, needs in Albany. And I suggest the board, I'm certainly looking, from my side of the table, I'm looking for a legislative solution to it. I suggest the board should look for a legislative solution to this, that these dedicated funds should really be dedicated. It shouldn't be a question of, well, we want the money now. Now, there is another point I'd like to make too, and it's not, don't think for a minute, I'm a labor representative, don't think for a minute my chief concern is not the people getting laid off. And it is a business character to trade unionism, and of course, I'm very concerned with the represented employees that are losing their jobs. But on the other hand, I don't know, you said there's 980 management employees? 977, and that's a big chunk of people too. Certainly there's a labor character to that too, the represented character to that. Some of those people probably have rights and will bump other people that are working. There's a lot of disruption that goes on in the workforce. But on the other hand, assuming these managers were doing something, their ability to manage their way out of the problem, to actually increase productivity on the shop floor on a day-to-day basis, I'm assuming will be substantially diminished. Now, earlier this week, there was discussion in the papers, perhaps I heard it in discussions here too, with regard to the schedule slippage and the cost overruns on the East Side access. And when it came down to what can the MTA do about it and why has the MTA not managed the schedule slippage better, perhaps Mike could answer this. The schedule slippage and cost overruns was a huge amount of money, $800, $900 million there too, and a couple of years of schedule slippage, and maybe in fact worse than that for all we know. But one of the points that brought up, well, why hasn't the MTA reacted to this? They said, well, we got a lot of open positions here where we haven't filled these positions, where we have MTA positions that were supposed to be monitoring this sort of management role, and they were unable to do so because nobody was in those seats. So it would seem to me that you're eliminating possibly your only tools for saving money by eliminating a lot of positions. And of course I feel that way about the represented employees, and it's a personal tragedy. Each one of these people that came and spoke to you, it's a personal tragedy to lose your job. And I hope the unions can find a way to negotiate a better solution here. But in the meantime, let's chase that $143 million, and let's be careful about how many people we slice out of the management structure here, or the cost overruns and schedule slippages, and these enormous capital projects are just going to get worse.
Thank you. I have Doreen, you wanted to speak, right?
Yes, thank you. I have a couple of things to say, and I'll try to say them as succinctly as I can. Andrew said something about debt, and first of all, I want to say, Andrew, that I owe you an apology. You said we could cut hundreds of millions of dollars from this place, and I didn't believe you, and as it turns out, we're able to do that, and you've been relentless in your scrutiny of doing just that. Thank you for that as well. I think it's going to make us a better organization, I hope. But you also talked about debt, and debt and the capital program are the 7-ton elephants in the room that we don't talk about. We throw a blanket over it and we think we've covered it, but I think maybe at best we've put a string bikini on the elephant. We have to face the fact that fundamentally we're debt addicts, we're junkies, and the state gave us a very, very big fix when it said, we're going to cut subsidies, but you got $6 billion to go fund what you need to fund. We also have to understand the nexus between the capital and the operating budgets, because there is overlap. And it involves understanding the debt process, which is kind of arcane, and I'll try to simplify it. We are paying interest during the construction periods of projects, in part from the fare box. So we are paying for capital with the fare box. That means that less money is dropping down to pay operating and maintenance expenses. Now, we've cut 20% out of a lot of the agency budgets. We certainly haven't cut the capital program 20%. We're issuing the same amount of debt today in these horrible times as we've issued when we were a little more flush with cash. I think we have to examine that. I think we have to look at what we are spending capital dollars on. We can have a very lively discussion about what sends you back to the 70s faster, cutting operating dollars or cutting capital dollars. They're both gruesome. But I think the operating budget has been bearing a brunt that it should not bear. I hope, Bob, you're going to look into maybe using some of the commercial paper that we've now going to be issuing to fund some of that construction period interest, so that instead of taking money out at 4.5% from the fare box, we're taking it out at 0.5%. Let's at least look at that. In addition, I hope the press is going to help us with this a little bit. I doubt it, but I hope they will. 14% of our users are going to be paying $2.25. The rest are going to be paying anywhere from 95 cents to $2.10 a ride. That is a pretty interesting statistic that does not get a lot of play. I don't know many other transit systems in the world that provide discounts to users, and I wish we would be given more credit for that. Finally, we took actions today to lay off station toll booth attendants, and we have been firing some of our non-represented staff as well. And firing people in an environment like this haunts me as much as the service cuts haunted me. It haunted me the minute I took the vote, and it will be getting to me for years to come. I hope we are treating these people humanely. I hope we are trying to help them get new positions, and I hope that we get some of our humanity back in this process.
I'm going to try to wrap up. I'm sorry, you trying to say something, Nancy? No? Okay. I'm going to try and wrap up this process. Who did I miss? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ira. I told you.
For the record, I love Norman. I love both Normans. It's hard for me to picture an elephant in a string bikini, Doreen. But anyway, regarding something Norman did say, the $143 million, we should go back for it. It isn't just that. This is a long period of time. There's a long history here. It's the student. It's paying for the students to get to school. There's some other cross subsidies, and getting also to what Pat and what Mark said. There's a long history there, too, of the city sometimes stepping up, sometimes not stepping up. Goes back for administration, same thing with Nassau. And I understand the resentment from county to county. But I think the call for a regional bus system it's probably long past, and it's probably time for that, because it's time we work together as a region. That's part of the goal. That was one of the major reasons for the creation of an MTA. Now, counties and the city do contribute to the MTA. People don't mention this, and one of the things is station maintenance. They're required to pay that, and they do. So counties are paying. And each county pays for its own bus system. New York City contributes for New York City bus, and some people say it's not enough. Some people say they should less. Whatever it is, these things should be worked out in a new way of looking at things, in a more regional approach. And I think congestion pricing should be part of it as well. Instead of maybe tolling the bridges or saying you pay to get into Manhattan, everybody should be paying in some formula depending on the mileage you travel on your automobile, because you're causing congestion almost wherever you travel. Anyone on Long Island knows this. The highways are packed, going east, going west. Speaking of going east from Queens, I understand Nassau County Bus does carry a lot of Queens residents, and I'm happy for that, and that's part of our regionalism, and I would hope to have even more of that, because you can't travel, it's very hard to travel east on the railroad. And the Long Island Railroad Commuters Council is just that. It's set up just for the Long Island Railroad. There is no bus advisory committee, and some people on our council who do ride the buses want to set up a subcommittee of ours, and I think we're going to try to do that, so this, at least for the time being, there's some voice for Nassau County and even Suffolk County bus riders, although that's not part of the MTA, but maybe. The economic benefit is for everyone. On layoffs, I just want to say this: layoffs especially for a large organization, especially for a large organization like the MTA, shows a failure in planning. Not our planning. We were told we were going to have a certain amount of money. It was cut off, the $143 million and other funds as well. So we had to make those cuts. Instead, we hear a lot of people targeting us, saying you should have made the layoffs. They're a choice we made. We could have, and some people just said we could have raised fares. That's true. But the blame does come from, there was a plan that was accepted. It was one of our partners, well, more than one of our partners, reneged. That's the person that's responsible for the layoffs, I think. Ultimately, that's where the blame has to go. And layoffs are horrible for a lot of different reasons. One thing, you hired somebody, a few years later, you fire that person. That person had a thought they had a job, and now in a way, that now they're out in a bad economic time. Where are they supposed to find a job? We all know that. It's pain. It's horrible to think about, because many of us maybe have even been in that situation many years ago. Moving on, I just want to say about the commuter railroads that the fare increases have to go in place. Something has to be, the money's not there. This was part of the plan. That's fine. There was an article in the Times earlier this week about on-time performance. That's something we're looking forward to, both commuter councils, Metro North and Long Island, and looking for statistics that really show the impact of on-time, of late trains on passengers, how many passengers are delayed and by what degree. And I think that will help in credibility, and that's something we all have to strive for. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to try and wrap up. I think to summarize some of what I've heard and make sure that we have it, I think clearly the situation we've been forced to discuss today has been, that we've been facing today has been forced on us by the circumstances that have happened in regard to our finances. The taking of $143 million of monies that had been allocated and appropriated to the MTA stands out in that process. The shortfalls that have come in our dedicated taxes through the payroll mobility tax and through the real estate taxes, which continue to be very soft in this economy. I think it is important for everybody to recognize this is not a situation that we've created. It's not a situation that's occurring because our expenses are up. It's not a situation that's occurring because our ridership is down. It's a situation that is occurring because our subsidies have not been there and because monies were taken from the state. Points well taken in all regard in doing that. I think there's a point that's been made about the capital program and about debt. I know several members of the board spoke about this. Again, point extremely well taken. We will go back. We will continue to look. I would point out to remind the board that in your adopting the revised capital program proposal for the MTA, we did take out $1.8 billion in that proposal. But I think Doreen's point, Andrew's point, and others are making a broader point than that, and I do appreciate that, and we will go back and look to be able to deal with that as well. Clearly, and I think Doreen captured this, we need to look both at the capital budget and the operating budget and the interfaces between those and the way in which we protect and provide the service to our customers. That point extremely well taken. I think in terms of fares, the other point that I heard from people was flexibility. We want to have an open public dialogue and discussion about this. It is very clear. I think somebody talked about who subsidizes whom. I think, Mitch, maybe you made that comment before. That's a very important point, because everything we are talking about involves some form of cross-subsidy in one way or another. The only way that we would not do that is to simply charge everybody the same fare. And we did that for, 1904 to 1996. We also have a choice to go back to that if we want to do that as well. But I think in the structure we have today, thinking about what those would be and recognizing that, I think, is important for us to do. We will write the hearing notice to allow that discussion to take place, allow the board to take action as it sees fit following those hearings and that discussion. Do recognize that some of those proposals will be at much different price points than what is contained in this right now, because if you want to have, for example, an unlimited ride pass and a cap pass at the same time, you end up in a price point that is significantly different than the places that we've talked about right now. That will not be an argument that we should or should not do it. It's mainly a point of putting it out for public dialogue and debate and retaining the flexibility of being able to do it. I heard that clearly from the board. I think it's a good point. It is a debate, I think, frankly, that's overdue, because we've embarked down this process of having a much more complicated fare structure, and it's time to look back at it, and it's time to think about what some of that will be, all within the umbrella of saying we need to raise 7.5% in a revenue yield. How we do it is the question, not whether or not we need to do it in that regard. No shortage of discussion on the Nassau County question, as one might have expected. I do hope that we will find a way through some of this, and I would pledge myself to being a voice that will work with Pat and others to see if we can do that. I unfortunately, do not feel that a discussion about trying to decide whose hole is larger and worse and other things like that, and necessarily the problem that's there. And, much as, it's only our responsibility to deal with the budget of the MTA. Each county in the MTA region is making its own choices about what it wants to do in taxes, where it wants to spend its money, and how it wants to do that. I appreciate those are decisions made by elected officials in each of those counties. I'm not trying to get into that, but I would not accept the view that Long Island Bus is, by definition, then MTA's problem in the way that we go forth. We have to have a discussion about that. And I think Pat, the county and executive, and I will take that going forward, and I'll do it in that manner. Toward points that have been made about layoffs are painful. They hurt our employees. We've had to lay off administrative staff. We've had to lay off operating staff. We should feel pain about that. I don't think anyone should not. We have made various proposals to be able to avoid some of those layoffs. They have not been accepted to this point. I remain hopeful that we'll find a productive dialogue in a way that we can at least mitigate some of the pain that is associated with some of this. And again, I will personally remain committed to trying to be able to do that with our workforce, if there's a way to find to be able to do that. And finally, before we go to a vote, I want to just add my thanks to the staff of the MTA. I mean, people have worked in an extraordinarily difficult circumstance. At the same time, literally, that we have been reducing administrative staff, the same staff who put together documents like this, who think through issues like this. We have a new CFO who came on board, and it's hard to believe with his command of the issue that he's only been here a few months in the way that is working. And everybody has stepped up at headquarters and across all of our businesses and the finance and budget divisions and the operating divisions to help make this possible. Numbers on a piece of paper that sound like they're easy about saving money. Let me tell you, there is nothing easy about doing it. Nothing easy. It happens because the people at each one of our agencies have come through in an honest and productive way and really thought hard about how we can save money and how we can work to save money and how we can continue to work to save money. And I just want to put my thanks to everybody across the MTA for the way that they've taken on this effort. There's nothing easy about it. There's nothing fun about it. But we are doing a necessary thing to be able to do that. And we will have to continue, I suspect, to continue on the path that we've laid out of making the MTA an even more efficient company as we seek to have better and better service for our customers. And that should be our goal. Better service, hopefully at lower cost. The last piece of business is to authorize the public hearings. Can I have a motion on that? In favor? Aye. Opposed? I think that concludes our business. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you. And I wish everybody a good holiday in the month of August, which I believe we do not have a meeting.
Congratulations, Susan. You did a great job here.
Thank you.
Very well done job.
Thank you.
That was very well said.
Okay.
Can you just confirm what the vote was today on stations closing and toll booth operators, so we're clear, and what was in the proposal versus what was voted on today?
The board approved the proposal that had been put forth before the board to close approximately 210 or to reduce approximately 210 station agents that were both filling booths and were acting as customer service agents.
So 210 voted out today. But in the new proposal that would have public hearings, how many additional potentially? Is it 400? I saw the number 450 in the proposal, so I just...
No.
So, okay, so are there any additional in the proposal to that, or no?
No, the proposal, I'm sorry.
On the plan that you all were just discussing.
The plan that did not contain additional closings.
You heard Doreen Praska, sir, in perhaps the most emotional moment of the last 3 hours, say that she is haunted by some of what you did here today. Do you feel it emotionally as well, sir, or is it simply numbers and achieving the savings that provides your definition of success?
I think you heard me say at the end that I very much feel this, and I very much feel that that everyone is people. We have people. All of our workers are important to us, and they all have families. They all have lives. The financial situation that the MTA has faced been faced with, however, is dire and bleak. We've had to make significant savings reductions across all of our businesses, in much the same way, by the way, that businesses across the state have had to make significant changes as they've reached into their pocket. We had put forth proposals that I had hoped would be able to work with our workforce to be able to mitigate or even eliminate the impacts of these layoffs. We were unable to reach an agreement on that. I remain hopeful that somehow we will be able to do that. I would like to do that if it's possible to do that.
Do you have a sense, we're talking a fare hike in 2011, now 2013, the riders are saying they can't believe there's another one coming so quickly.
The agreement that was reached between the governor and the legislature last May provided significant new subsidies to the MTA in the form of a payroll mobility tax, as well as various motor vehicle fees and taxi fees that were added as well. Those taxes and fees were expected to raise about $1.7 billion a year. As part of that package, the governor and legislature agreed that there would be regular periodic fare hikes for the MTA, and the dates of January 1st, 2011 and January 1st, 2013 were the dates that were agreed to at that time, and we've been holding to the package that was agreed in Albany.
So do you have a sense, is it the same size fare hike?
The package had anticipated two fare hikes, January 1st, 2011, January 1st, 2013, each of those fare hikes to raise 7.5% revenue yield, fare and toll hikes.
But the changes to the 30-day Metro card that you're proposing, how does that translate into an increase, percentage-wise? Whether you're reducing the number of, rides or increasing the price?
So as we looked at fare policy, we set out three goals and objectives for fare policy. We looked to maintain ridership as best possible. We looked at the equity of our fare structure, and we looked at the efficiency of our fares as well. I think one of the things that became very apparent as you look at the unlimited ride Metro card was that there's a wide range of usage that takes place on the unlimited ride Metro card. Many people, for example, use that card 50, 60, or 70 times to be able to travel. Many other people use it much more, 100 or 150 times to be able to travel. Effectively, the price per ride varies quite a bit depending on what people do. And the people who are riding and using it 50 or 60 times are in effect subsidizing the people who are riding it, who are using the system much more heavily. What we have done is to put forth a choice, and we've suggested that there are different ways that this could be done. One option would be to have a card that would be comparatively lower priced but would have a cap, for example, at 90 rides. Only 7% of riders on a monthly basis take more than 90 rides. Another choice would be to maintain the unlimited ride Metro card. That would be at a higher fare, and I think what you listen to the board say today is they wonder whether we could do both, whether we could have a cap pass and have an unlimited ride pass. And I think that the sense of the board, as I would summarize it, was that they'd like to have an open and full public dialogue and debate. We have a public hearing process that's coming up. We'll hold public hearings in September. They'd like a public hearing notice that leaves flexibility for a variety of options. We'll listen to the public and we'll take a decision about what the best way to do this is. All of the options will be designed to lead in aggregate to a 7.5% revenue yield, which is what was agreed to.
Do you have a sense of what the unlimited cost would be for a 30-day card if there were both options available to your customers? You said from earlier that it would be different.
It would be significantly higher, at least $25 higher, and maybe higher than $25 more. So it would be at least $130 or higher if you were doing that.
$130 Metro.
Or higher if you were doing that.
Unlimited ride?
If you were, again, we believe you can have an unlimited ride Metro card at $104. If you want, however, to have a capped ride and an unlimited ride, you'll be looking at a much higher fare. That is one of the choices the board asked us to look at. We're not making a proposal to that. We're simply saying that we will look at all the options that are on the table.
Were the fare hike proposals done with consideration to low-income riders to kind of, cushion them from?
Absolutely. If you look at our ridership, the monthly pass that is used, which it gives the greatest discount to riders, has a median household income of $68,000. On the other hand, the weekly pass, which has much less discount, has a median household income of $37,000. So we have very much sought, in looking at that, to look at the comparative household values and to recognize that the two products in particular that are used most by lower income people are the simple base fare used by about 14% of our riders and the weekly pass, perhaps reflecting that they can't put out the money at one time for a full monthly pass. Both of those products have significantly lower household income, and I would point out that in the proposal that had been made, both of those products would have the smallest increases of any of the changes we were making.
But 68,000 is not rich in New York City. Should those people have to pay a higher percent increase?
The point would be that the median household income of $68,000 is significantly higher than a median household income of $37,000. The point is not rich or poor. The point is where are people, which products are different people buying, and the median household income for the 30-day pass is significantly higher than the median household income for other passes.
On the issue of booth closures, there was some discussion about the intercoms, and it seemed clear that it's not where you hope it to be or want it to be. There are some problems with it. A couple of the board members expressed concerns that removing the station agents before these intercoms are up and running is a dangerous thing. Yet, you went ahead and approved it. Are you concerned that these intercoms are not working and now there won't be station agents down there?
I think what you heard was you heard the president of New York City Transit say that there would be no removal of station agents in any location that does not have a working intercom. I think he was very clear about that, and I'm being very clear about that.
If the state reneged on its commitments, and took away the $143 million, why is the MTA keeping its commitment?
Well, I think the point that was contained in the agreement is still right. First, that regular periodic fare increases are, in fact, an important part of having a business plan for an organization like the MTA. Second, if you're saying why are we holding to that commitment, the only choice I could think of that would have been different would have been to have had a higher fare increase. And I think in these economic times, we've sought very much not to have a higher fare increase. We recognize the impact that fares are having on families across the metropolitan region, and we sought to be able to limit it.
Question on a different subject, sir. There's been some talk about the 2nd Avenue subway being delayed yet again, and there's been an evolving position of the MTA as to what the reason for that is. There, initially, I believe it was said that there was slower boring in the beginning, but that would lead to an accelerated pace of boring, and now there seems to be some overall issue with the boring. Can you clarify what your current expectation is for the boring and ultimately for completion of that subway line?
So I think two things have happened, and part of the reason I think for some of the confusion. First, I think there have been historic delays in the 2nd Avenue subway project. They took place over a period of time. Some of that has come out recently again, and I think has created some of the confusion that is here. I think the more recent question, and I think the more relevant question right now, is about the boring on 2nd Avenue, and the fact is that we have not to this date achieved the production of boring, in other words, the number of feet per minute that we had expected to achieve. We had a discussion of that at our Capital Program Oversight Committee meeting. We're continuing to watch it very carefully. The contractor is taking actions to be able to get the boring up to the production rate that we need, but clearly that will be the most important indication about whether or not we're running on schedule. But we have to meet a production rate that is greater than what we've been able to achieve right now.
So your current expected completion year would be what?
At this point, I don't think it changes the current expected completion of the project, which is at the end of 2016. Mike?
The labor union has already expressed opposition to the proposal that no raises be given for a 2-year period, which is baked into the current budget. You're a pragmatist. I'm wondering if you consider that achievable at all.
Well, I don't think the proposal was that no raises would be given. I think the proposal was that wages should be linked to improvements in productivity.
Well, you would not give them a raise in exchange for other productivity improvements?
I think the point here is that we are in an economic time that warrants the fact that we need to link increases in our wages to increases in productivity. What we've said is the proposal is built around a net zero approach for our railroads, for our workers. I would also point out, by the way, that I think this is absolutely consistent with what's happening at the city and what's happening at the state, which is all of our governmental areas are struggling with a very, very difficult financial situation. It is possible, very much possible, that there will be wages increases. And in fact, I expect there will be. We just need to find ways to be able to tie it to improvements in productivity.
I had a question about, if there's nearly, I guess, $1.5 billion deficit in this plan by 2014, just want to be clear as to where you're saying that comes from. And what do you say to the people that will say, well, they approved the plan, but there's still $1.5 billion hole in it?
Well, I think what we were saying as you look at the plan was that, first off, we have been engaged in, I think, the single most aggressive cost-cutting program in the history of the MTA. Built into this plan now are annual savings of over $500 million a year for work that we've done just now to be able to achieve. If you combine that $500 million a year and the fare increases that were there, it's still not enough to be able to close the gap. So we committed ourselves to more. And we're going to do even further in terms of cost cutting, and I expect that by 2014 we will be achieving on an annual basis a reduction of $750 million every year in the cost of the MTA. That's what helps to make up the gap that we have there right now.
And the rest would be, I guess, labor?
Well, we're also looking, as I just mentioned, for to tie wage increases in productivity, which would also create some of the savings as well.
Can you talk a bit about Long Island Bus? Patrick Boyd mentioned that there's a new proposal on the table. Can you tell us anything about how serious the proposal that is and how close it would come to bringing Nassau where you want it to be?
Well, I think that the situation in Nassau Bus is the following. I mean, the MTA MTA operates Long Island Bus under contract essentially to Nassau County, in which Nassau County owns the assets and provides the funding to be able to operate that system over and above the fares and other state revenues that are there. For many years, that worked in exactly the way I just said. Sometime in the last decade, Nassau County began to reduce its contributions to the MTA. That shortfall today is $140 million. And in this year alone, we're looking at a shortfall of $26 million. Given the tightness of the MTA's financial structure, we simply do not have the financial capacity to be able to provide this support to Long Island Bus, which is frankly different than we do for any other part of the MTA region. Westchester County, Suffolk County, Dutchess, Orange, Rockland, Putnam counties all provide their own bus services and meet the full cost of being able to provide the service. What the financial plan says is that looking forward, we expect that Nassau County will go back to the historic and contractually provided basis in which they provide the subsidy for Long Island Bus. I think Pat Foy, in his comments, recognized that had been the way that it had been up until about a decade ago. He recognized that was the agreement that the MTA and Nassau County had. We're hopeful that we'll find a way to be able to work through this together. But the reality is that this is an obligation that Nassau County has in regard to Long Island Bus, and if those monies are not being provided by Nassau County, then they come back and effectively they fall to the riders across the rest of the MTA region. I think what you heard the rest of our board members say, or many of our board members say, is that doesn't seem to be fair to the constituents that are in other places, whether that's Suffolk, Westchester, or the city of New York.
Jay, it sounds like the rider advocates accept the idea that Albany's been shortchanging the MTA. The union seems to have a little less buy-in on that. Two questions then. One, what do you think about the increasingly personal nature of their criticism and attacks on you? And what about the proposal to cut pay at the MTA at the highest levels?
The nature of this is that I'm the face of the MTA, and I think the statement is really about the MTA. Clearly, I am leading the organization, and I accept the fact that I'm the face of the MTA as I'm standing and speaking with you right now. We have looked across all of our employees. We've reduced administrative staff across all parts of the organization, 977 positions. We've held salaries across the MTA. Non-represented employees haven't had an increase, did not have an increase in 2009 and will not have an increase in 2010. We're doing our part everywhere we can do it.
What about you personally, Jay?
Challenge they offer. I'm not sure I understand the challenge that they offer. The position of the chairman of the MTA has been compensated historically in the manner in which I'm being compensated, and I think that's the way that it will remain.
Jay, you said that this is not a situation of the MTA's creating, but if you look at it in the fact that you were able to identify, if not cut, $750 million in a relatively short amount of time, doesn't the MTA bear, maybe not in the last however months you've been here, but doesn't the MTA bear a large chunk of the responsibility here for these fare hikes? If you're so quickly able to identify so much in savings?
Well, I think two things. One is, from the day I walked in the door, I committed the MTA to making every dollar count and to being able to show people all across the state and our riders that we're using the dollars that we receive as effectively as possible. I think the MTA has now done that. We've engaged in an incredibly aggressive cost-cutting program, and we're saying we'll do more. And as I said before, the sum total of that by 2014 will be $750 million a year that we're saving for riders and for taxpayers within the MTA. So we've done our part in being able to do that. I don't want to give any misleading impression that this is easy. It's not easy. It is hard work. It's taking place across the entire organization to be able to do that. People talk over and over again about the pain and the difficulties of being able to do that. You heard a lot of the comments today about that. So we shouldn't misinterpret the fact that we've been able to do this to say that we found easy money. We haven't found easy things. We've taken hard, painful decisions, and that's what you've seen the MTA do. The point that I'm making about the fact it's not of the MTA's doing is the following. Just 15 months ago, people stood in Albany and put together a financial package to support the MTA. When I arrived in October of 2009, it began to bleed red ink. And today, it's bleeding $900 million in this year alone and $2.5 billion over the course of the next 5 years. Not $1 of that is due to the fact that the MTA's expenses have gone up. Indeed, as I've just described, they're going down. Not $1 of that is due to the fact that our ridership has fallen off against our projections. Indeed, our ridership has been inching up, and we feel very positive about doing it. It is all due to two things. It is due to a decision made at the state to take $143 million from the MTA as part of the deficit reduction plan. And second, it is due a shortfall in the revenues that had been expected back in May 2009, both in the payroll mobility tax and in the real estate taxes supporting the MTA. But I can't stress enough the fact that we've gone in, done hard work, made painful decisions should not be confused with doing something that's easy.
Thank you. Thank you.